Hongtian Academy, Lu Sun's classroom. As a star teacher of the academy, his classroom was several hundred meters wide, as big as a massive football field. Students have lined up in rows after rows, and they numbered several hundred. As expected of Lu Laoshi, I have heard rumors outside that innumerable students find it an honor to become your student and they go all out to be admitted under your tutelage, but to think that it would be true. Looking at the number of students in the classroom, an elderly stroked his beard as he looked at a young man not too far away from him. The young man was around 26 to 27-year-old. Dressed in blue, he stood upright as though a spear that would pierce through the heavens, carrying a haughty aura with him. As for the elderly, if Shang Bin is here, he would be able to recognize him. He was the master of Hongtian Pavilion, Elder Hong Hao. You have praised me excessively, Elder. I am just fulfilling my responsibility in nurturing them. They have overrated me. The young man chuckled. His words might be humble, but his attitude exuded self-confidence and pride. It is clear to see whether you have been overrated or not just by seeing the standards of the students. I have heard that over 70 of the top 100 students have been admitted into your class after applying for it. Furthermore, of the 200 new students you have accepted, there doesn't seem to be a single one who is placed beneath 500. Elder Hong Hao smiled as he stroked his beard. Yesterday, when he heard the figures, he was also taken aback. Despite being young, this Lu Sun Laoshi had become the most radiant star teacher in the entire academy. Almost all the good buds among the freshmen had been taken by him. Such results, despite the long history of the academy, was rarely seen. It is my honor for students to be willing to apply for my lessons. Hearing praises from a fighter 7 Dan elder, Lu Sun Laoshi swelled in pride. After which, turning around, he asked, Elder Hong Hao has always been a busy figure, so what kind of wind brought you here today? Could it be that you have something that requires my help? As long as it is within the scope of my abilities, I will give it my best. He didn't believe that a powerful elder like him would be here just to chat. Speaking of it, there is indeed something that I need to trouble you with. I have been old friends with your father and I watched as you grew up. I know that you are an upright person, so I came here to request you investigate a teacher for me. Elder Hong Hao said. Do not mention my father, he is a stubborn antique. Seeing how the other party was trying to play the emotion card, Lu Sun frowned. Which teacher do you want me to look into? Zhang Xian. Elder Hong Hao said. After that incident with Zhang Xian in his Hongtian tavern, his business was now negligible. Rage had already been burning furiously in his heart. If not in consideration for his identity, he would have already ran up to the dwelling of the other party to bash him up. Zhang Xian. You mean the one who scored 0 for his teacher qualification examination and sent Zhao Yanfeng's cultivation berserk? Lu Sun looked over. He had already heard of the various, glorious, deeds of that Zhang Laoshi. Furthermore, he even accepted a student of his, so how could he not be aware of it? Indeed. Elder Hong Hao nodded his head. He is just a trash of a teacher, he would be fired sooner or later. Does Elder have a grudge with him? Lu Sun was puzzled. On one hand was an established elder that could vie for the academy's principal position while on the other, a teacher who could be fired at any moment. The two lived in totally different worlds, so how could they be related to one another? It is just some minor matters. I have heard that the Education Bureau has issued an ultimatum to him. As long as he fails to accept any student this school term, his teaching license will be revoked and he will be expelled from the academy. Thus, I hope to trouble Lu Laoshi to see whether you can accept those students of his under your tutelage. Elder Hong Hao revealed the purpose behind his visit. He had already looked into Zhang Xian's affairs before heading here, including the fact that he had recruited 5 students this school term. The other party was a teacher and this identity protected him, leaving the elder without a means to deal with him. However, the moment he lost this identity, wouldn't he be his to slaughter? Except under my tutelage. Lu Sun didn't expect the other party to look for him over such a matter. Indeed. As the star teacher of Hengtian Academy, you are probably the only one capable of doing so. As long as you reveal such an intention, his few students would most probably withdraw from his lessons and rush to come under you. Elder Hong Hao chuckled. Dealing with a teacher who has students under him is troublesome. If he has no students under him, then things wouldn't be that complicated. Lu Sun hesitated. There is nothing to hesitate about. Have you forgotten about Zhao Yanfeng? If you allow Zhang Xian to continue teaching the students like that, history will just repeat itself and the lives of his students will be ruined. You are saving them by bringing them over. Elder Hong Hao immediately gave him another push upon seeing his hesitation. All right, I will help you on this matter. I will reveal my intention to accept the students under his tutelage today. Lu Sun nodded his head. Great. Elder Hong Hao's eyes lit up and excitement coursed through his heart. Now that Lu Laoshi had agreed to it, he could already clearly vision the disappointed and despairing face of Zhang Xian. Since he dared to leave Hengtian Pavilion on the verge of closing down, he will slowly play with him and show him what true fear means. Just as he was rejoicing over it in his mind, pondering about what he should do to punish him, a new student rushed over. Lu Laoshi. Upon standing before Lu Sun, he knelt down. Wang Yan, what is wrong? Seeing this youngster, Lu Sun smiled and nodded his head. This Wang Yan was one of the few most talented ones of this batch of freshmen. Furthermore, he was the grandson of the second elder of the Wang clan, thus possessing an esteemed position. Even for him, he felt proud to accept a student of such standing. Lu Laoshi, Wang Yan, who just came over from the Enlightenment Will Tower, knelt onto the floor and he appeared to be conflicted. Have you met with some trouble in your cultivation? Free to speak. Seeing him stutter, Lu Sun spoke grandly. Lu Laoshi's knowledge is vast, not to mention that he is the most famous teacher in the entire academy. If you have any difficulties, feel free to speak of it. He is definitely able to solve it for you. Elder Hong Hao said with a smile as he stroked his beard. All right, I will speak then. Wang Yan clenched his jaws and continued, I would like to withdraw from your tutelage. I hope Lu Laoshi can fulfill my request. Withdraw from my tutelage? Lu Sun staggered. His eyes widened in disbelief. Other people fought with one another to be admitted under him, and yet this fellow wanted to withdraw from his tutelage? Are you for real? After teaching in Hengtian Academy for numerous years, he had never met with such a situation. Yes. Now that the word was out, Wang Yan heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly nodded his head. Do you have anything that you find hard to speak of, or were you threatened by someone else? Lu Sun couldn't resist asking. No, this is a choice I made of my own free will. Wang Yan said. You know that after withdrawing from my tutelage, no other teachers in this academy will accept you, right? Hearing that he made the choice out of his own free will, Lu Sun continued on. He was the most famous teacher in the academy. How could any other teachers dare to accept a student who withdrew from his tutelage? As long as I withdraw from your tutelage, I would be able to listen in on Zhang Xian Laoshi's lessons. This is an opportunity for me, so I hope Lu Laoshi can grant my wish. Wang Yan lowered his body. Withdraw from my tutelage to listen in on Zhang Xian Laoshi's lessons? Hearing those words, a constipated expression appeared on Lu Sun. With his mouth agape and eyes in perfect circles, he felt as though something had gone wrong with the world. Not just Lu Sun was carrying such an expression, even Elder Hong Hao felt the world spinning around him as he found it difficult to cope with the sudden turn of events. Wasn't Zhang Xian the worst teacher in the entire academy? Just a moment ago, he said that as long as he were to release word of his interest to accept his students, they would come rushing over. However, never in his dreams would he have expected that even before he could make a move, one of the students he held great expectations for had ran over to him. It is one thing if the other party had accepted you, but to listen in on his lessons? The heck, are you sure you aren't joking with me? That means that you don't have any position at all. Instead of being my direct disciple, you chose to ran over to listen in to someone else's lesson. Lu Xun felt as though his face had been slapped hard and his complexion darkened. I hope that Lu Laoshi can fulfill my request. Wang Yan hurriedly pleaded. After a long period of time, looking at the serious expression on the other party's face, he knew that the other party was serious. With an awful expression, he said, "You do know that Zhang Xian Laoshi had once caused a student's cultivation to go berserk? Even so, you want to listen in to his classes?" "I am aware of it, but I would still like to." Wang Yan nodded his head, the determination on his face resolute. Just a moment ago, he got a glimpse of Zhang Laoshi's amazing capabilities that left even his grandfather in awe. At this moment, his heart was already with Zhang Xian. Seeing how determined the other party was, Lu Xun's complexion darkened even further. Gesturing to the few students by the side, he said, "Bring Zhao Yanfeng over." Lu Laoshi. A short moment later, Zhao Yanfeng arrived. "Wang Yan says that he would like to withdraw from my tutelage to listen in to Zhang Xian Laoshi's classes. Tell him how it was when you cultivated under him and let him know how foolish his decision is." Lu Xun flung his sleeves. Zhao Yanfeng didn't speak and instead, he knelt down and kowtowed continuously. "What's wrong? Didn't you recount the situation frequently in the past?" Lu Xun frowned. Zhao Yanfeng, as the student whose cultivation was sent berserk by Zhang Xian, had the greatest say in the matter. In the past, he often spoke badly about Zhang Laoshi, only to be stopped by him. Even though was granting him permission to speak now, he seemed reluctant to do so, as if something was plaguing his mind. Lu Laoshi. "Actually, just like Wang Yan, I would like to listen in on Zhang Laoshi's lessons." Finally solidifying his resolution, Zhao Yanfeng said. "You want to go as well?" With a steeled face, Lu Xun almost stumbled to the ground. "Didn't your cultivation go berserk because of him? Don't you resent him for that? Didn't you talk badly about him often? So why would you want to withdraw from my tutelage to listen in on his lessons?" Lu Xun felt that he was on the verge of going insane. "Zhang Laoshi is my benefactor. I feel extremely guilty for leaving him without bidding farewell the previous time. I hope that Lu Laoshi can fulfill my wish." Zhao Yanfeng said respectfully. "Benefactor? Benefactor your head. By sending your cultivation berserk? Leaving without bidding farewell? It is clear to see that you were trying to escape from him, all right? Guilty? When you insulted Zhang Xian Laoshi every day, why didn't I see a single trace of guilt in you?" Lu Xun felt like going on a frenzy. All right. Since the both of you have made up your minds, I will withdraw you two from my tutelage then." Grabbing the 2 jade tokens over, he bit on his finger and dripped a droplet of fresh blood on the both of them. As the star teacher of the academy, Lu Xun was a proud person. Since these 2 students of his have already made up their minds, stopping them would only make them resentful of him. If so, he might as well simply let go of them. "Thank you, teacher." Grabbing over the jade token and confirming that they were withdrawn from Lu Xun Laoshi's tutelage, Wang Yan and Zhao Yanfeng's eyes lit up simultaneously. "The both of you aren't my students anymore, you can leave now." Suppressing his rage that was on the verge of erupting, Lu Xun waved them away. "Yes." The 2 of them walked out. Damn it. Upon seeing them leave, Lu Xun roared. Who was he? The #1 star teacher of Hengtian Academy. Countless students vied with one another to become his student and he had to contemplate carefully before making a choice among them. He thought that no one would be able to poach his students in the academy, but not just one, but 2 students were poached from him in one go. Furthermore, if the one who poached these students from him were Wang Chao or Shen Bairu, he could let this matter drop. But for it to be the one who scored a 0 in his teacher qualification examination, the fellow who stood at the very bottom of the academy. The strong feeling of humiliation he was feeling made him feel frenzied. Not to mention, he had just agreed to Elder Hong Hao's request to poach the other party's students. Yet, before he could make a move, the other party had already succeeded in poaching his. If not for his propriety and his concern over his identity, he might even rush over to beat up this Zhang Xian. Zhu Hong. After venting his anger slightly, the rage Lu Sun felt cooled down slightly. He turned around to call for his student. Lu Laoshi. A 16 to 17-year-old youngster walked out. Zhu Hong, the student who was ranked 4th in this year's entrance examination. He was one of the most talented students he had accepted this semester. Even though he was only 16, he had already reached Jushi realm pinnacle and was ready to break into the next realm at any moment. Deliver a war letter to Zhang Xian Laoshi for me. Lu Sun gritted his teeth. War letter. Hearing his decision, Elder Hong was taken aback. After which, he came to a realization and asked, could it be that during this freshman tournament, you hope to, indeed, to dare to poach my student? I, Lu Sun, have never suffered such humiliation. Lu Sun Laoshi waved his hand. Then, clenching his fist tightly together, he continued, since he dares to make a move on me, then he should find a way to withstand my rage as well. After which, he retrieved a paper from the desk and wrote on it. Pass this to Zhang Xian, tell him that I will challenge him to a teacher evaluation during the freshman tournament half a month from now. Ask him if he dares to accept my challenge or not. If he dares not, tell him to never do such petty actions behind my back. Lu Sun flung his sleeves majestically. Every year, half a month after the acceptance of the freshmen, a freshman tournament would be held. This tournament allowed the students to showcase their talents and improvement. It was a stage for the students to show their worth as compared to their peers. As for teacher evaluation, it was a battle between different teachers. During a teacher evaluation, the two competing teachers would choose a few of their students and compete based on their cultivation realm, their battling prowess and theoretical knowledge, so as to ensure the effectiveness of the teachers' classes. Through such competition, the competency of the teachers were being assessed and evaluated. From the eyes of the outsiders, Lu Sun Laoshi proposing the challenge to Zhang Xian was a one-sided slaughter. Yes. Zhu Hong's eyes twinkled in reverence. The results of teacher evaluation affected the respective teacher's pride and honor. As a result, such challenges were usually held privately. Lu Laoshi was probably the only one who was confident and proud enough to send a war letter directly to another teacher face on. As expected of his idol, he was simply too suave. Venting his discontentment whenever he is angered, not even needing to suppress his emotions at all, he was his role model. Go! Lu Sun ushered him. Zhu Hong nodded his head, turned around and left. Do you really intend to hold a teacher challenge? Elder Hong Hao walked over and asked. Not only so, I want to hold a bet with him. If he loses, all of the students under his tutelage will go to me. A glint flashed across Lu Sun's eyes. Ever since he became a teacher, his life had been smooth sailing. Just as he intended to make use of these qualifications to attract the attention of a master teacher, so as to rise up to the position of an assistant master teacher, he met with such an affair. If not for such thoughts of his, there was no reason at all for him to accept Zhao Yanfeng, who didn't have a high cultivation realm and had gone berserk once before. After all, he was a teacher, not a Samaritan. If he was truly a good person, he could have just accepted all students who applied for his classes, there's no need to select among them at all. It was all for the fame. He wanted to accrue sufficient reputation to become an assistant master teacher. If others were to hear that his student had withdrawn from his lessons to listen into the class of someone who had scored 0 for the teacher qualification examination, wouldn't his reputation go into the gutters? Thus, no matter what, he had to get back at the one who inflicted such humiliation on him. Chapter 83, The Arrogant Zhu Hong, Will Zhang Laoshi be okay? In the classroom, Zhao Ye, Wang Ying, and the others were worried. Chao Xiong Laoshi had applied for the Enlightenment Will trial to deal with Zhang Laoshi. Even though not many people knew of it yet, as his students, they still heard some news of it. Don't worry, we had been through Zhang Laoshi's lessons and we were all impressed with him. Ouyang is impressed by him, so it is impossible for anything to go wrong. Ouyang said. Of the 5 students Zhang Xian accepted, he was the one who was the most dissatisfied with Zhang Laoshi. However, after 2 lessons, he was already thoroughly impressed with him. Right now, even if Wang Chao wanted to accept him in, he would reject him flat out. Since this was the case with him, it was bound to be the same with Ouyang as well. With such level of trust, how could Zhang Xian fail the test? Boom! In the midst of speaking, someone abruptly sent the metal door flying with a kick from outside. After which, a young man walked in haughtily. Where is your respected Zhang Xian Laoshi? Get him to come out. With both hands behind his back, the young man's eyelids rose slightly as he said those words. He intentionally emphasized on the words Zhang Xian Laoshi. Not only was there not a single trace of respect in his expression, he seemed to be mocking him. Who are you? We don't welcome you here, so please leave. Upon seeing the other party speaking of Zhang Laoshi with such disrespect, not to mention that he kicked the door open, Zheng Yang's face darkened. Zheng Yang, don't be rash. He is the one who was ranked 4th in the entrance examinations, Zhu Hong. Recognizing the young man, Yuan Tao's fat body shook as he hurriedly pulled Zheng Yang back and whispered to him in a hushed voice. Zhu Hong. Not just Zheng Yang, even the faces of Zhao Ye and the others darkened. They have heard of this name before. Zhu Hong was reputed to have already reached Jushi realm pinnacle, and it was possible for him to break through into the next realm any moment now. Ranking 4th in the entrance examination, this clearly showed that his strength and talent were something they were unable to match up to. To be able to recognize me, looks like you aren't as dumb as I thought. This is a war letter from Lu Sun Laoshi. He wants to challenge Zhang Xian Laoshi to a teacher evaluation during the freshman tournament half a month later. So, who is going to accept this letter in his stead? Upon seeing the others recognize him, the edges of the young man's lip crept upwards. With a condescending look, he spoke contemptuously to them. This person was the one who just walked out of Lu Sun's classroom, Zhu Hong. He had long heard of Zhang Xian, the worst teacher in the academy who scored 0 in the teacher qualification examination. As one blessed by the heavens and Lu Sun's prided student, he looked down on him. Teacher evaluation? Lu Sun Laoshi. In that instant, everyone's faces changed. Even though the ones to compete in the teacher evaluation were them, it was considered as a battle between the teacher's ability to guide their students. This concerned the pride of their teacher and very few people chose to hold it. Lu Sun was the academy's most famous teacher and there were countless experts under his tutelage. Why would he challenge Zhang Laoshi? Indeed, the petty actions Zhang Xian was doing behind Lu Laoshi had incurred his wrath and he had decided to teach him a lesson. I will be leaving the war letter here, pass it to him later. If you all dare not to accept the challenge, then admit defeat earlier and head to Lu Laoshi's classroom to apologize to him. Otherwise, prepare to be shamed. Zhu Hong threw the war letter onto the table and turned around to leave. Hold it right there. Before he could exit the classroom, Zheng Yang dashed forward and blocked his path. You kicked the doors to our classroom and spoke of Zhang Laoshi so disrespectfully. Apologize, or don't blame me for being discourteous. A student had the responsibility to guard the honor of his teacher. This fellow was without a sliver of respect for their teacher. How could they allow him to do as he pleased, wanting to leave right after dumping that war letter? You want me to apologize? You need to have the capabilities for it first. Sneering coldly, Zhu Hong looked at him contemptuously and sent a kick at him. Zheng Yang's skill with the spear was incredible, but his punching and kicking mastery were severely lacking. Furthermore, as his cultivation level was beneath that of the other party, before he could even react, he was kicked squarely in his chest and flew backwards, crashing heavily onto the ground. Audacious! Zhao Ye's face warped in anger. With a roar, she charged forward. Just like Zhu Hong, she was Jushi realm pinnacle as well. However, her fighting prowess was slightly inferior to the other party. After trading a few blows, she was struck on her shoulder and retreated backwards. After which, Wang Ying and Yuan Tao also charged forward. However, since even Zhao, who was the strongest of them all, wasn't a match for him, how could they stand up against him? In a short moment's time, the four of them had sustained some injuries. They were enraged by the other party's actions, but they were helpless to do anything. They might have learnt quite a few profound theories from Zhang Xian, but due to the lack of time, they still weren't a match for one who was placed fourth in the entrance examination. A bunch of trash. After defeating the crowd, Zhu Hong flung his sleeves and said, "This is just a small punishment." He should have thought of this possibility when he challenged Lu Laoshi. Tell him, if he doesn't dare to agree, hurry up and apologize, otherwise what? Before he could finish his words, a faint word echoed from the doorway. Along with Lu Yang, Zhang Xian walked into the classroom. Otherwise, regardless of whether Zhang Xian was a trash or not, he was a teacher. As a student of the academy, he wasn't someone he could insult. Even though Zhang Xian had yet to fly into rage, Zhu Hong cowered backwards. Gritting his teeth, he harumphed, "Otherwise, prepare to lose in shame in the teacher evaluation. It is not your place to determine whether I would lose or win. Return and tell Lu Sun that I had accepted his war letter." Zhang Xian waved him away. Actually, he was a little dismal as well. After expending much effort to coax Huang Yu and Bai Sun to leave, he had intended to continue the lessons for a bit more. Yet, before he could enter the classroom, he heard the bellowing of this fellow. Lu Sun had challenged him. "You have a few hundred students under you. It is just a single Wang Yan who is coming to my lessons to listen in by the side, surely you don't need to make such a big fuss out of it. Furthermore, even if you wanted to dispatch a student to send a war letter you should at least choose someone reliable." This fellow, despite being a junior, he was acting so arrogantly. If not in consideration for my identity, I would have extinguished his life with a single slap. If not so, do you think that I would allow him to be acting so snobbishly here? That's for the best then. Farewell. Zhu Hong prepared to leave. Wait. Zheng Yang struggled forward. He looked anxiously at Zhang Xian. "Zhang Laoshi, not only did he speak disrespectfully towards you and smashed our door, he even attacked us. If we were to allow him to leave like this, wouldn't others just see us as easy targets in the future? Why? That thrashing wasn't sufficient for you? Humph. Despite being weak, you sure speak so arrogantly, you damned brat." With his head held up high, Zhu Hong's gaze swept across Sheng Yang, Zhao, and the others scornfully before sneering, "Just this shabby classroom and these few students, I don't care if that door really means anything much. After all, do you think anyone would secretly listen into your lessons? Stop dreaming. Besides, you all would need more capable than that to keep me here. I will stand here, and if any of you think they're sufficiently skilled, come at me." At which, he paused for a moment before clasping his hands towards Zhang Xian. "Zhang Laoshi, as a teacher, surely you wouldn't stoop down to the level of attacking a student. Teachers had their own pride as well. If he were to really attack a student, he would be looked down by the others." This was also what the saying, "soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals" meant. Even if a general were to defeat a small soldier, it wouldn't be something honorable for him. Calculating that it was unlikely Zhang Xian would make a move on him and that none of his students was a match for him, he was fearless. Zhang Laoshi, seeing Zhu Hong behaving so arrogantly, the faces of Zhao, Zheng Yang, and the others paled. They clenched their fists tightly together and an urge to charge forward and bash him surged through them. However, they also knew that they weren't a match for Zhu Hong. They had already fallen tragically in defeat previously. They would only make a shame out of themselves if they were to continue making a move against him. "You want to teach him a lesson?" Ignoring that conceited fellow, Zhang Xian turned to look at his students. Yes. All of them nodded their heads simultaneously. Seeing their expression, Zhang Xian casually waved his hand. Then, with a serious expression, he said, "No matter what, he is Lu Laosher's student. It would be hard for me to account to him if he were to die. How about this, Yuan Tao, your strength is the weakest, and you have good self-control, go and beat him up into a pig head and have him compensate for our door while you are at it. Remember to hold back. Also, during the fight, you must remember to play fairly and not to go overboard. Don't wound the camaraderie you have as fellow students. Ah. Upon hearing Zhang Xian Laosher's words, Zheng Yang and the others were on the verge of tears. Teacher, can't you tell? We aren't afraid of you being unable to account for the matter if we were to beat him to death, but that we are unable to match up to him. Yet, you still went on and chose Yuan Tao to fight in our stead. He is still at Fighter 1 Dan primary stage, how do you expect him to defeat his pinnacle expert before us? Beat me up into a pig head and compensate for your door. Ha! Zhu Hong laughed so hard that he almost failed to catch his breath. He knew what the level of strength the others were at when they crossed blows, especially for Yuan Tao, the one who scored the worst in the entrance examination. Yet, he dispatched him out to beat him up into a pig head? He had long heard that Zhang Laosher was terrible at teaching, but he didn't expect his eye of discernment would be so terrible as well. After which, with a trace of mock in his eyes, he declared, all right, if any of you can defeat me, not only will I pay for your door, I will compensate him with 1,000 gold coins. As the saying went, the poor studied while the rich trained. For Zhu Hong to possess formidable strength at such a young age, this showed the wealth his family possessed. 1,000 gold coins wasn't a small sum, but it was still something he could take out easily. You will compensate anyone who defeats you? Zhang Xian asked. Of course. With both of his hands behind his back, Zhu Hong sneered coldly with a smug look on his face. They have just crossed blows, and these people wouldn't be able to defeat him even if they were to cultivate for another decade. Your time to earn money has come. Zhang Xian waved his hand. Looking at his students, he said, Yuan Tao, it would be best for you to make a move first. Remember teacher's words, go easy with your blows. Yuan Tao's face knitted into lumps. This fellow is so powerful that even Zhao Yisiaojie was unable to defeat him. How could I fight against him? If I say that you can win, you will win. Knowing what he was thinking about, Zhang Xian walked up to the podium and sat on the chair there. That is because you are my students. You are all Zhang Xian's students. Zhang Xian's students? Upon hearing these words, Zhu Hong burst into laughter once more. The name of Zhang Xian Laosher is indeed immense, almost rivaling with that of Lu Sun Laosher, but that's notoriety all right? I might find it difficult to win against the students of other teachers, but your students, Zhu Hong's face was filled with disdain. While he was chuckling scornfully, Yuan Tao jolted. Hot blood surged through his body and the bitter look on his face disappeared. That's right, despite the incredible capabilities of Zhang Laosher, he is being mocked at this very instant. As his student, it is my responsibility to safeguard his honor. Even if it means my death, I mustn't allow him to be scorned by others. At this point, zeal sprouted in his heart and he no longer felt fear. Thus, he stepped forward, ready to make a move against him. Don't rush. Seeing that he was about to rush over, Zhang Xian waved his hand once more to stop him. Why? Does Zhang Laosher intend to go back on his words? Zhu Hong snickered. Go back on my words. Zhang Xian shook his head. You are overthinking it. Yuan Tao is too incredible, it wouldn't look good on me if he were to kill you accidentally. How about this, Yuan Tao, come over. I will teach you 3 basic punching moves. 3 basic punching moves. Yuan Tao and the others were perplexed over what this teacher of theirs was trying to do. A last-minute training? Learning battle techniques right now? I'm afraid that it's too late. Zhu Hong was filled with contempt. What kind of joke is this? Every single battle technique requires countless hours of practice, training for days and nights, enduring the heat and cold, and only then will one be accomplished in it. Do you think that you can make them triumph over me by teaching them something at the last moment? Dream on. Teacher Yuan Tao had the same thoughts as well. He walked forward hesitantly and reflected on his face was confusion. Yuan Tao was truly unable to comprehend the rationale behind Zhang Laosher's actions. Assuming that Zhang Xian wanted to help them redress their grievances, his choice of sending Yuan Tao forward would only embarrass them further if he were to lose against Zhu Hong. Yuan Tao, trust our teacher. He must have an idea in mind for him to say such words. Lu Yang had witnessed the happenings in the Enlightenment Will trial with his own eyes. He knew how formidable this notorious Zhang Laosher in front of them was, and he had complete trust in him. He was able to help someone break through within 10 minutes for what that would have taken the other party half a year. With such capabilities, what else could he possibly be incapable of? All right then. Hearing those words, Yuan Tao clenched his jaws. Since he had been beaten up a while ago, the worst situation that could get was for him to be beaten up once more. Anyway, he had a thick skin and was resilient to beatings, so there was nothing for him to fear. The few of you should come over to learn it as well, it will help you all win the bet later on. Zhang Xian looked at Zhao Ye and the others. Yes. The 5 of them walked over. Look closely, this is the first move. Stretching apart his 5 fingers, Zhang Xian's left hand grabbed at the empty air before him. The movement was so simple that even ordinary humans could comprehend and execute it, needless to say, them, who were well versed in martial arts. The second move. Without a pause in his actions, Zhang Xian sidestepped from the left to the right. The third move. With his right hand clenched into the shape of a fist, he sent an downward punch towards the other party's chest. Withdrawing his fist, he straightened his posture. Zhang Laosher, is that all? Seeing that there weren't any more movements to it, everyone was dumbfounded. Zhang Laosher, you must be joking. These 3 moves are as trashy as the fighting methods of those ruffians outside, there isn't a single depth to them at all. We can achieve victory with these 3 moves. Are you sure you aren't joking? Zhao Ye and the others could feel tears welling in their eyes. Even Zhu Hong had his eyes widened in complete circles. He felt as though the world had gone insane. You declared that your students will beat me up into a pig head, so I thought that you will teach them some profound moves. What the heck is this toy? You call this battle technique? Furthermore, when you were teaching them, you didn't even try to conceal them from my sight. Teaching such trashy moves in front of me, do you take me for a corpse? Alright, these 3 moves are extremely simple, so you all should have comprehended them already. Yuan Tao, go. As long as you use them well, defeating this fellow isn't a problem. Zhang Xian ushered him over. Yuan Tao's face was filled with bitterness. He knew that he wasn't a reliable person, but what Zhang Laosher had just taught them was even more unreliable. He wouldn't even use these 3 moves in his usual fights against others because they were too lousy. There was not a single depth behind them at all. Even a dog could dodge those easily, not to mention, a human. Go. Zhang Xian's face darkened. Yes. Gritting his teeth, with the emotions of a brave warrior charging to his death, Yuan Tao walked over to Zhu Hong and declared, let's get on with it. Are you sure you want to fight with me? Zhu Hong looked at him as though he was looking at a fool. Truly eccentric teachers and students. If you could defeat me after learning 3 farmer brawling techniques, I should just kill myself. Humph. Ignoring the other party, Yuan Tao, who was already prepared to be pummeled, roared and lunged forward. There was no depth to the techniques he was using at all, and there wasn't much difference between his fighting style and those ruffians in the alleys. He didn't use the movements Zhang Xian had just taught him. In his perspective, since he was going to be beaten up, it was best for him to not to make a fool of himself. You are courting death. With a cold sneer, Zhu Hong took a step back, dodging the other party's offense. At the same time, he pushed him with his palm. Tada! Flying straight out, Yuan Tao crashed onto the floor. However, due to his thick skin, he didn't feel any pain from the fall. He stood up and charged forth once more with clenched jaws. It hadn't been long since he started learning battle techniques. He didn't have time to comprehend or execute any techniques, and thus, he could only rely on the instinctive brawling techniques that he used in the past. These moves might work against those ruffians by the alley, but to Zhu Hong, a cultivator, it was as laughable as playing house. He had already decided to fight for Zhang Xianlaoshi's honor. Even if he was beaten to death, he would not give up. In the midst of his charge to go all out against the other party, Zhang Laoshi's voice rang by his ear. The poor studies while the rich trains. As long as the poor has books, regardless of their condition, they are able to study. If they were to strike it out big, they would be able to bring riches and glory back to their province/town. On the other hand, to learn martial arts, one has to first find a capable teacher. Furthermore, they would need money to feed themselves correctly to strengthen their body as well. Jinqi telepathy. You fool, use the 3 moves that I have just taught you. Execute the first 2 moves inversely, use your right hand and right foot instead of your left hand and left foot. Execute the last move as it is, just change the fist into a finger strike and strike at the spot 3 inches lower. Remember, it has to be 3 inches. It mustn't be any more or any less. One had to be at least fighter 5 Dan to use Jinqi telepathy. Zhang Laoshi's telepathy caused Yuan Tao's body to jolt. Somehow, he felt inclined to trust him. Let's just do it. Things are already bad as it is anyway. Without time to think too deeply into it, Yuan Tao decided to just go through with it. After all, it wasn't like he had any other ideas. Thus, without any hesitation, he did as the voice commanded him to. As a cultivator, switching a left-hand movement to the right was an extremely simple task. That left-hand grab turned into a right-hand grab, causing Zhu Hong to be taken aback. He tilted his head to dodge it and sent a punch back at him. However, before his fist could even reach Yuan Tao, the latter had already sidestepped from the right to the left, dodging his attack. Crap, he is using the inverse version of the technique. Zhu Hong immediately understood what is going on. Thus, he quickly withdrew his hands to cover his face. Previously, the third blow was a downward punch. Since his techniques were inversed, this move would be an uppercut instead. Furthermore, Zhang Xian had said earlier to beat him up into a pig head. He reacted extremely quickly and his movements were swift. However, it was a pity that Yuan Tao's third move wasn't inversed. It was still a downward motion and furthermore, it was aimed 3 inches below what Zhang Xian had shown earlier. Pooh! Before Zhu Hong could even react, he felt a stabbing pain at his waist and his entire body went numb. This is bad, he struck my Ming Men. How did he know where my Ming Men is? Zhu Hong's face turned deathly white. He had carefully guarded the fact that his cultivation Ming Men was in his waist from others. Previously, the 2 inverse movements used by Yuan Tao made him instinctively think of protecting his own face. Never would he have thought that the other party's true motive lied here. The moment his Ming Men was struck, his entire body went stiff as though he was paralyzed. This is a good opportunity. Seeing Zhu Hong's body go stiff, no matter how foolish Yuan Tao could be, at this moment, he knew that he had struck the other party's Ming Men. After yelling excitedly, he charged over. He would be a fool if he didn't exploit such a God-sent opportunity. Peng 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 peng. At this moment, the techniques of the alley ruffians that should have never reached Zhu Hong landed like torrential rain on Zhu Hong's face. Before he could recover, his vision went dark. Yuan Tao's massive punch had sent him to the floor. At this moment, his years of experience brawling gave him the upper hand. Without much hesitation, he leapt over and sat heavily on the other party's chest. His 2 fists smashed violently onto the other party's face. Recovering from his numbness, upon seeing a fatty crushing his body and striking his fist, Zhu Hong felt so dismal that he was about to vomit blood. He was an apprentice of Lu Sun Laosher, an expert who was in the 4th place in the entrance examination. Yet, at this moment, he was being beaten up by the fellow who was last in the entrance examinations. He felt as though he was going mad. Scram, he tried to push the other party away, but the other party is simply too heavy. As though a tiny mountain, no matter how much effort he put into his arms, the other party didn't budge in the least. Furthermore, his fists were as hard as rocks and they smashed down on him relentlessly. Before he can finish his words, he felt his mouth getting more and more swollen as though a bun, and quite a few of his teeth had fallen off as well. Are my eyes deceiving me? Zhao Ye and the rest were flabbergasted by the sight before them. They had experienced Zhu Hong's strength a moment ago and they had confirmed that even they were not a match for him. Yet, Yuan Tao, the weakest of them all, was about to achieve victory against him at this moment. When did he become so incredible? However, the most shocking thing of all was that their teacher's 3 moves actually worked. Enough. Yuan Tao. I have already said that beating him up into a pig head is enough, don't kill him. Upon seeing Zhu Hong losing his human appearance under Yuan Tao's frenzied punching, Zhang Xian hurriedly stepped in to stop him. No matter what, he was an envoy sent over by Lu Sun. It wasn't appropriate for them to go too far. How awkward the situation would be if he were to be crippled under his pummeling. Other teachers, even the elders, would have to contemplate for a long moment before they could teach their students how they could counter their opponents. After all, a battle was constantly changing and evolving. However, Zhang Xian was different. Possessing the Library of Heaven's Path, he was able to know in advance what battle techniques the other party would execute and what responses the other party would come up with. As such, through exploiting the flaws in their techniques, he was able to come up with a strategy to counter them even before the battle begins. Even though Yuan Tao's strength paled much in comparison to Zhu Hong's, if he were to know the other party's Mingmen and make preparations in advance, defeating him was an easy feat, yes. After sending a few more fists at his face, Yuan Tao felt the anger he had accumulated being vented out. Only then did he stand up and get off the Zhu Hong's chest. At this moment, Zhu Hong was already no different from a pig head. His eyes were swollen red, and his entire face had bloated up. His dignified look from before had disappeared without a trace. You are despicable. Struggling up, Zhu Hong gritted his teeth and glared at Yuan Tao. In his view, this fatty must have been putting on a show. He intentionally feigned weakness so as to put him off his guard, before doing a sudden assault to achieve victory. Damn it! Despicable. I am despicable, what about it? Do you want to give it another go? Yuan Tao didn't care about whether the other party thought if he was despicable or not. At this moment, he was still immersed in the exhilaration from bashing the other party up and stared back at him shamelessly. Seeing his fearlessness, Zhu Hong's complexion turned awful. Even so, he dared not to agree to his challenge. This fatty obviously knew where his Mingmen was. If he were to happen to strike it once more, he would just be beaten up again. Just as he was in a dilemma, Zhang Laosher's words echoed in his ear. All right, you have already left the other party in such a state. Yuan Tao, you should give it a rest. Zhang Xian had a stern expression on his face. Good. Upon hearing those words, Zhu Hong heaved a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to say some pleasantries and leave the classroom, he heard Zhang Laosher speaking once more. Zheng Yang, didn't you want to give it a try just now? Go on. Ah. Zhu Hong was taken aback. Didn't you stop him so that I can leave? Why are you asking others to get a go on me? After a temporary pause, a gleam of ruthlessness flashed across his eyes. It's fine this way as well. Previously, that Zheng Yang was the first to charge over, and given the fact that he was able to send him flying with a single kick, it was clear that his strength was subpar. Furthermore, given the experience he had with Yuan Tao, he should be fine as long as he guarded himself against the inversion the 3 moves. Besides, after getting pummeled so tragically, how could he account the situation after returning without repaying the favor back to them? At this point, even though he still held doubts, Zhu Hong gritted his teeth and sneered, "Come." "Fine." Zheng Yang stepped forward. Peng peng peng. The two of them started crossing blows. Zheng Yang, who was sent flying with a single kick previously, seemed as though he had eaten some incredible tonic. He flew around the field, refusing to face Zhu Hong directly. "I dare you to fight with me face on." Zhu Hong bellowed. Normally, even if Zheng Yang were to skirt around him, he would have the strength to catch him and defeat him. However, he was just beaten to a pulp by Yuan Tao and his body is aching tremendously. It is almost impossible for him to land a blow on a Zheng Yang, who was focusing all of his efforts on dodging his blows. "Sure." Upon replying, Zheng Yang's left hand grabbed forward. After which, he sidestepped to the right. He used the first move as it is, inverting only the second move. After which, before the other party could react to the abrupt changes, he used his finger as a sword and jabbed straight at Zhu Hong's waist. "I knew you would react like this." Knowing that his three techniques would either be as it is or inverted, Zhu Hong was well prepared in reacting to both scenarios instantaneously. As the one who was the fourth in the Academy's entrance examination, he had undergone all kinds of major and minor battles. He might have let his guard down towards such a superficial technique, which allowed the enemy to get the better of him. However, now that he was guarded, how could the same trick possibly work again? Sneering coldly in his mind, he deflected Zheng Yang's finger stab with his right hand, thwarting the enemy's attempt to strike his Ming Men. Just at the moment he was about to counterattack, he noticed that Zheng Yang's attack below was actually a feint, and another fist was already right before him, aiming straight at his face. Peng! Before he could even react, he was struck squarely by it. "The heck, how can you be so despicable?" Retreating 2 steps consecutively, Zhu Hong's tears flowed down his face. Zheng Yang's fist was much more formidable than Yuan Tao's. With a single fist, Zhu Hong was already on the verge of fainting. Despicable? There is no such thing as despicable in the middle of a battle. Zheng Yang couldn't be bothered to continue speaking with him. After getting him with that single blow, he continued pushing ahead. As the finger on his left hand continued to jab at Zhu Hong's Ming Men, his other fist kept smashing down on the other party's face. The 2 different attacks came straight onto Zhu Hong consecutively. There was no hesitation behind the attacks, not even the slightest pang of conscience. Every time Zhu Hong decided to block, he realized that one of them was a feint. After a few went past his guard, his face had swelled up even further and his vision went blurry. He felt so frustrated and at the same time, stifled that he was on the verge of puking blood. Too shameless. Even if you all know where my Ming Men is, there should be no need for you all to constantly assault it, right? It is just like continuously checking a king in chess. Is there a point to it? Where's your sportsmanship? My face is already swollen to such an extent, and yet you still smash on it mercilessly. Didn't you speak about playing fairly in the duel? Where is the fairness? Where is the justice? You still dared to say not to go overboard, not to wound the camaraderie among fellow students. Where the hell is your boundary of going overboard? Stop. Knowing that he might die if he continued on like this, Zhu Hong could only suppress the pain he felt in his heart and hurriedly withdrew from the fight. I admit defeat. There was no other choice for him than to admit defeat. The other party knew where his Ming Men was, and the crux of it all was that his opponent had no decency at all. Attacking his weak point over and over again, how could he possibly cope with it? If he wasn't injured, he could have escaped his attacks by utilizing his movement techniques and seeking for another opportunity to counterattack. However, given how he could barely squint through the slits of his swollen eyes, if this were to go on, he might very well die here. It is good that you admitted defeat. Zhao, it's your turn, Zhang Xian said. Please enlighten me. Zhao walked over. Without even giving the other party time to react, she immediately attacked him frenziedly. Her attack routine was no different from Zheng Yang's, striking either at Zhu Hong's Ming Men or his face. Zhu Hong cried. Alright, Wang Ying, give it a try as well. After admitting defeat once more, even before he had the time to speak, Wang Ying walked over. After which, Ouyang very quickly, each of Zhang Laosher's 5 students had pummeled him once. At this time, Zhu Hong's eyes were truly narrowed to only that of a slit, making him not much different from a blind person. Alright, hurry up and pay up. 1,000 for each of us here, and taking into account the cost of the door as well, a total of 10,000. Yuan Tao walked forward. 10,000? There are only 5 of you here, how can it possibly add up to 10,000? Zhu Hong was about to go insane. Our door costs 5,000. Yuan Tao declared. 5,000. Zhu Hong's tears streamed freely down his face. 100 gold coins can probably be exchanged for 5 of these broken doors, and yet you are claiming 5,000 gold coins from me as reparation fee? Even scammers don't scam others like that. It's fine if you don't want to pay. Zhang Laosher, the few of us would still like to spar with this expert who was placed 4th in the entrance examination. I hope that teacher can grant our request. Shen Yang said. Alright, but you mustn't go overboard when sparring among fellow students. Zhang Xian nodded his head seriously. Mustn't go overboard? Forget it, there's no need for it, I will pay for it, is that enough? Hearing Zhang Laosher replying with the words he said a moment ago, the edges of Zhu Hong's mouth twitched. How could he possibly dare to retort at a time like this? He quickly retrieved $10,000 notes over. He could feel his heart bleeding as he watched the other party take the notes from his hands. He might be from a wealthy family, but 10,000 gold coins were around what he had saved throughout these years. For him to lose all of his fortunes here because of this war letter, as though afraid that he might be pummeled to death, Zhu Hong swiftly escaped after paying the sum. A moment ago, he charged in here arrogantly, acting as though he was superior to everyone else. Yet, never would he have expected that he would be beaten to such a state. Teacher, the moment Zhu Hong left, Zheng Yang, Yuan Yao, and the others stared at their Zhang Laosher, who was sitting at the center of the room, with eyes filled with reverence. The main reason why they were able to defeat Zhu Hong was thanks to the 3 movements that he had imparted them. To allow them to defeat a stronger adversary with just a few casual pointers, it was as though he knew what kinds of battle techniques the other party would use. How did he manage to achieve such an incredible feat? Lu Laosher, do you think that Zhang Xian will accept your challenge? Elder Hong Hao chuckled as he stroked his beard. Now that Lu Sun Laosher has made a move, Zhang Xian is surely in for a ride of misfortune. It is just a matter of time before his students are taken over, leaving him without a student under his tutelage once more. It doesn't matter whether he accepts it or not. If I don't show him the consequences of stealing my students, how can I, Lu Sun, uphold my dignity in Hongtian Academy? Lu Sun Laosher harumphed coldly. That's right. Elder Hong Hao nodded his head. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he saw a fellow with a completely swollen face, similar to that of a pig, walking in. Lu Laosher, please redress my grievances. The moment the person walked in, he started to bawl. You are, Lu Sun was a little startled by the unfamiliar visitor. I am Zhu Hong. The visitor took another 10,000 points of damage. Zhu Hong. Didn't I just send you to deliver the war letter? How did you land yourself in such a state? Hearing the other party identifying himself, Lu Sun took a closer glance and found certain traces of Zhu Hong on the other party's face. Surprised, he couldn't help but ask. How did you get into such a state just by sending a war letter? I was beaten up. Zhu Hong's tears gushed down from his eyes. Zhang Xian actually paid no regards to his identity as a teacher and attacked you? Lu Sun's face suddenly darkened. He abruptly stood up and a powerful aura burst forth within the classroom. He had already opened dozens of acupoints and was a true blue Pishue realm expert. No wonder he was a star teacher, his strength was already befitting for the position of an elder within the academy. Zhu Hong was the 4th strongest student among the freshmen, as assessed during the entrance examination. Even though this ranking system wasn't completely indicative of his fighting prowess, it still reflected his exceptional ability among the freshmen. There were no veteran students under Zhang Xian's tutelage. The only one who could have possibly left him in such a state was Zhang Laoshe himself. It's the students under his tutelage. Zhang Laoshe didn't have a move. Zhu Hong's face blushed crimson in embarrassment. Student? You mean Zhao Ye, Xingyang, and the rest? Since Lu Sun had already challenged the other party, he sent some students out to look into the students under Zhang Xian and realized that the students under him in this semester were, surprisingly, not that bad. They ganged up together against you? That isn't right. Their placings in the entrance examinations weren't too bad, but I have already guided you in your training personally. Your cultivation is just a step from breaking through into the next realm. Even if they were to gang up on you, they shouldn't be a match for you. The strength of Zhao Ye and the others weren't too bad, but this Zhu Hong was significantly stronger than them. These 2 days, Lu Sun had spent quite a bit of effort on him as well. In terms of individual fighting ability, there shouldn't be anyone beneath Fighter 2 Dan who should be a match for him. Even if the few of them were to gang up against him, Zhu Hong should still be more than a match for them. How did he get beaten up to such a state in a short moment's time? Chapter 87, Is he really the worst teacher? Initially, they weren't a match for me when they ganged up on me. However, at this moment, Zhang Laoshe came in. He taught them 3 movements and somehow, every one of them seemed to have powered up suddenly. The first one to fight me was Yuan Tao. Zhu Hong explained everything that had just happened previously once. He even demonstrated the 3 movements which Zhang Xian had imparted them. Hearing his story and looking at the 3 movements Zhu Hong demonstrated to them, Lu Sun and Elder Hong Hao stared at one another in disbelief. They doubted if their ears were playing tricks on them, and their complexion looked as awful as one afflicted by constipation. You mean to say the Yuan Tao who was ranked the last in the entrance examination? Just these 3 moves and yet you weren't a match for him? You must be jesting with us. The results of the investigation that just came in earlier contained Yuan Tao's information as well. His parents died when he was young, and he had never learned any battle techniques or cultivation techniques. The only strength he had was his thick skin, granting him powerful defensive abilities. Even so, he scored the last in the entrance examination, thus clearly indicating his level of ability as compared to his peers. How can someone like that defeat an expert like you who was ranked 4th? Do you have to be so exaggerated? Furthermore, after taking a look at those 3 movements, they had confirmed that they were trash. Could those movements even be considered a battle technique? Even if the other party were to use it inversely, swapping their left and right, it should mean nothing at all. Zhu Hong recounted the happenings in the battle detailedly with a pained look. Looks like your Mingmen was exposed. Those 3 movements were only a distraction to attract your attention. Their main goal was your Mingmen. Lu Sun came to a realization after the other party recounted the entire incident. This student of his was too careless. Mingmen was the location where the strength of a cultivator gathers. It was the core of a cultivator's strength, and one had to guard it properly. For him to allow his Mingmen to be seen through so easily, he was truly too negligent. Finding an opponent's Mingmen didn't mean that one can defeat him with 100% possibility. After all, battles weren't just simple math, it involved one's reaction speed and ability to adapt to sudden situations. However, when 2 people of similar cultivation level were to fight with one another, it was still a dangerous scenario if the opponent were to locate one's Mingmen. It is impossible for those students of his to find your Mingmen and exploit that flaw of yours. It seems that this Zhang Xian Laoshe isn't simple. Initially, I thought that it would be a simple and meaningless win. However, from the looks of it, things aren't as they seem on the surface. Interesting. As expected of the Academy's star teacher, Lu Sun swiftly analyzed the crux of the issue. Mingmen is a weakness of all cultivators. Usually, one would guard it properly, making it difficult for others to locate it. Furthermore, even if one were to locate an opponent's Ming Men, if one doesn't have the sufficient strength to stand up against one's opponent, it is still difficult for one to achieve a victory. It is as though giving an ordinary human a dagger. Even though the human knows that the other party would die with a single stab through his heart, he is still unable to defeat a boxing expert. If the few students of Zhang Xian could see through his Ming Men beforehand, they would have won against Ouyang from the very start. It is apparent that Zhang Xian had told them of it in secret. However, it matters not. I will find a way for you to break through to Fighter 2 Dan now. Once you succeed, your Ming Men will move and by then, you will be able to exact your vengeance. Waving his hand grandly, Lu Xun consoled him. A cultivator's Ming Men didn't stay at the same location. Depending on one's cultivation technique, cultivation realm and battle technique, their Ming Men would be in different locations. At this moment, Zhu Hong's Ming Men was by his waist. Once he broke through Fighter 1 Dan, his Ming Men would move to another point. By then, he would be able to completely neglect those petty tricks of theirs. It was rumored that those who cultivate an incredible cultivation technique, upon reaching a certain powerful realm, would not have any Ming Men or weakness. It was impossible to find even if one were to jab every single spot of their body. Yes. Zhu Hong nodded his head. A while later, I will look for Elder Shang Chen to ascertain the nominal role for the competition. Cultivate properly and don't disappoint me. When the time comes, I will allow you to exact vengeance with your own hands. Thank you, Lu Laoshi. Motivated, Zhu Hong regained his confidence once more. Right, Elder Hong Hao, don't you have a good relationship with Elder Shang Chen? It should be much more efficient for you to deal with a trash teacher like Shang Chen by knocking on the Education Bureau than looking for me. Upon recalling Elder Shang Chen, Lu Xun couldn't help but look at him doubtfully. Back then, Elder Hong Hao was a serious contender for the position of the academy's principal. He had amiable relations with many elders and Shang Chen was one of them. Logically speaking, if he really had something against Zhang Xian, wouldn't getting the Education Bureau to make a move be much more convenient than seeking for his assistance? Actually, it isn't convenient for the Education Bureau to make a move under such circumstances. After all, we can't forcefully pull a student away from his teacher. If we were to do so and he complains up to the teacher guild, saying that he has been oppressed, wouldn't the matter just blow big? Elder Hong Hao replied. If a student were to acknowledge a teacher by their own will, even the Education Bureau had no rights to interfere in their choices. Most importantly, in his eyes, Zhang Xian was nothing more than a trash who had scored 0 for his teacher qualification examination. If so, was there a need to look for the head of the Education Bureau? He would be making a mountain out of a molehill. Of course, he couldn't say such words out loud. Otherwise, Lu Xun Laoshi would find his actions disrespectful. Actually, given Lu Xun's wits, it was likely that he had already guessed the truth. If it wasn't for 2 of his students being poached from his side, he wouldn't be bothered to interfere in these matters, needless to say, propose a teacher evaluation against Zhang Xian. As the both of them was in the midst of chatting, they suddenly spotted a young man walked over with widened strides. Lu Xun, before the young man reached the duo, he had already shouted out Lu Xun's name. Oh, it's Wang Laoshi. What are you doing here? Lu Xun smiled. The one who came was the other star teacher of the academy, Wang Chao. The spear expert whom Zheng Yang wanted to acknowledge as his teacher. Elder Hong Hao. Upon reaching, Wang Chao noticed Hong Hao, who was sitting beside Lu Xun, and bowed. After which, he hurriedly turned to look at Lu Xun and asked, "Have you heard about the happenings with the Education Bureau?" Heard of what? Lu Xun was puzzled. You don't know about it? Elder Shang Chen has been stripped of his position and is currently undergoing investigation. Wang Chao exclaimed. The teacher guild has just passed down the orders. Elder Shang Chen has been stripped of his position and is undergoing investigation. What's going on? Not only was Lu Xun in a state of disbelief, even Elder Hong Hao was taken aback by this sudden news. How can the head of Hengtian Academy's Education Bureau be stripped of his position and undergo investigation all of a sudden without any forewarning? It is rumored that he had oppressed a teacher and lacked impartiality in his actions. Some also say that he was unfair when conducting the Enlightenment Will trial. Anyway, the teacher guild had been informed of these matters and he was immediately stripped of his position. Wang Chao said. Chao Xiong had caused quite a ruckus when he applied for the Enlightenment Will trial, so quite a few teachers knew about it. Oppress? Lack impartiality? Which teacher is so formidable to be able to prompt the teacher guild to make a move and drag Elder Shang Chen off his authoritative position? Lu Sun couldn't help but comment. Elder Shang Chen might just be a head of Education Bureau, but he had a powerful backing. Several elders in the teacher guild were his friends, so overthrowing him, not to mention doing it so thoroughly, should be an extremely difficult task. Elder Hong Hao could also infer that much, and he was curious to know which influential figure it is to be capable of wielding such power. According to the rumors, it is that trash of a teacher in our academy Zhang Xian. Wang Chao pondered for a moment before replying their doubts. Zhang Xian. How is that possible? In that instant, as though their tails have been stepped on, Elder Hong Hao and Lu Sun leapt up simultaneously. Their eyes were widened to complete circles and they felt as though the world was going mad. Just by eating a few food, he was able to topple an established tavern with more than a decade of history behind it. Also, he was able to impel students to withdraw from the tutelage of the academy's #1 teacher. Furthermore, just casually teaching his students were able to beat the 4th-ranked freshman up into a pig head. Lastly, and the most shocking of all, he was able to topple the head of the Education Bureau, Shangchen Zhang Xian. Was he really the worst teacher in the academy? 1. This phrase is an idiomatic expression that means making a big deal out of a small issue. Chapter 88, Apothecary Guild. Alright, let's stop lessons here today. When you go back, cultivate based on what I have taught you all today. I don't wish to lose in the teacher evaluation half a month later. I also wish that your thoughts are the same as me. After talking a little more about cultivation in the classroom, Zhang Xian waved his hands to signal the end of the lesson. After interacting with the others these 2 days, he was gradually getting used to his profession as a teacher, and the disposition of a teacher slowly built on him. Yes, Zhang Laoshi. Zhao Ye, Zhen Yang, and the others clenched their fists with reddened faces. After the previous incident, they knew that Lu Sun Laoshi had challenged Zhang Laoshi and they were the stakes in this challenge. If it was 2 days ago, they would have gone insomniac over the excitement of being able to come under Lu Laoshi's tutelage. However, at this moment, they were absolutely unwilling to acknowledge anyone except for Zhang Xian as their teacher, even if they were beaten to death. He was able to see through the flaws on them with a single glance, treat the disabilities of Zhao Ye, Wang Ying, and the others, whip out profound cultivation techniques on a whim and even helping them find Zhu Hong's Ming Men, allowing them to easily achieve a victory over him. Zhang Laoshi seemed to possess a unique charm, causing them to be astonished and impressed at the same time, making it difficult for them to think of anything else. Goodbye, teacher. The few of them left the classroom. You said that Zhang Laoshi was able to strike 55 ding with a single punch? Even Bai Sun Xiao Wang Ye was trying to seek guidance from him. The moment they walked out of the classroom, the crowd couldn't help but to question Lu Yang about the happenings in the Enlightenment Will trial today. Lu Yang didn't hide anything and revealed everything that had happened. When the crowd heard that Zhang Laoshi actually possessed the strength of a Pixue realm expert, the astonishment in every single one of their eyes could not possibly be faked. In that instant, their eyes glowed in reverence. When they heard about the shameless doings of the Education Bureau, every single one of them felt so indignant for Zhang Xian that they were about to erupt from the rage welling in them. Everyone, Lu Sun Laoshi's challenge is actually a good opportunity for us to cleanse Zhang Laoshi's reputation. After recounting the happenings in the Enlightenment Will Tower, Lu Yang scanned the faces of his fellow peers before continuing. Thus, I hope that all of us would train properly this half a month so as to win glory and honor for our teacher, as well as to forge a reputation for ourselves. Indeed, Zhang Laoshe is noble and magnanimous, so he might not be bothered with the slander of these despicable people. However, as his students, we have the responsibility to right his reputation. Zhao Ye's beautiful eyes were twinkling, and a resolute gleam could be seen within it. I agree as well. The dense Ouyang also gritted her teeth in anger. Zhang Laoshe had healed her legs for her, even specially creating a cultivation technique for her. Even if she were to crush her bones into powder, it would be hard for her to repay this gratitude. Count us in. Yuan Tao and Zheng Yang stepped forward as well. It's a promise then. This half a month, we will give our all into our training. Then, during the freshman tournament, we will make those who look down on Zhang Laoshe see unwavering determination reflected in Ouyang's eyes. With a slow but powerful voice, he said that his students are the best. The battle half a month later, unaware of his students' blazing morale, at this moment, Zhang Xian was seated in the staff room. A frown so deep that lumps formed could be seen on his face. He didn't worry much about Zhao Ye and Wang Ying. Given their strong foundations, accompanied with the cultivation techniques that he has imparted them, their strength would definitely make a big leap half a month later. As for Zheng Yang and Ouyang, they possessed acceptable talent and they were ambitious as well. As long as they were properly guided, it wasn't a problem for their strength to soar. However, Yuan Tao remained a factor of anxiety for him. This fellow is a wandering cultivator. He has no backing or connections whatsoever. In fact, he never really came into contact with cultivation techniques before, so it would be difficult for him to improve swiftly within half a month. Unless his ancient emperor bloodline awakens. A thought flashed through his mind. He had checked Yuan Tao's condition with the Library of Heaven's Path a few days ago. He had confirmed that he possesses the ancient emperor bloodline. As long as it was awakened, regardless of whether it was Yuan Tao's level of cultivation, his defense or speed, they would all rise exponentially. This seemed to be the only plausible method for his strength to rise swiftly. But how can the emperor bloodline be awakened? The answer of his problem brought about another problem. The emperor bloodline was a type of bloodline passed down from the ancient times and it was incomparably valuable. There were sporadic records of it and most of those who know of it only knew of its name. Most probably, there wasn't a single person in Tianxian Kingdom who knew how to awaken it. There are normally 3 methods to awaken a person's unique constitution. Firstly, continue training the conventional method. Once one reaches a certain level, it is possible for their unique constitution to be awakened. This is the most reliable but lengthiest method. In fact, most people died even before they got a chance to awaken their potential. Secondly, one can also check the nature of the unique constitution and consume a pill corresponding to the attribute of the body. With powerful medicinal effects, there is a certain level of possibility for one to successfully awaken their unique constitution. Thirdly, forcefully awakening one's potential through special experiences, such as death or poison. There was an expert whose unique constitution awoke after his body was slashed over 70 times consecutively. There was also another one who, after being poisoned, bled from the 7 apertures of his body. After losing his breath for 3 days, his unique constitution awoke and he successfully resurrected. With a jolt in his mind, a book regarding unique constitutions floated into his mind and a few methods of awakening them were written on it. After taking a look at it, dark lines appeared on Zhang Xian's face. The first and the second method is still acceptable, but what the heck is the third method? Either death or poison. What if one fails to awaken their unique constitution after being consecutively stabbed 70 times or consuming lethal poison and bleeding from their 7 apertures? If so, wouldn't they really die for sure? Looks like only the second method is viable. He rubbed his glabella. The third method was definitely out of question. On the other hand, with only half a month, the first method could not be relied on either. After thinking about it, it seemed that only the second method was the feasible one. Since that's the case, I should head over to the Apothecary Guild to take a look. Perhaps, I might find some suitable pills to awaken Yuan Tao's emperor bloodline and Zhao Ye's purine body. Standing up, he walked out of the staff room. If Zhao Ye and Yuan Tao were to awaken their unique constitutions, it was definite that their cultivation realm would soar. Almost all of the occupations of the upper 9 paths have their own alliance organization, such as the Teacher Guild, Blacksmith and Appraiser Guild, Formation Master Guild, Beast Tamer Guild and such. The apothecaries were no different as well. As one of the unique occupations in the continent, even though apothecaries paled slightly in comparison to master teachers, they were still of esteemed standing and it was an occupation many looked forward to. After all, there wasn't a single cultivator who didn't want to break through his current realm, and didn't get injured. Most of the time, a cultivator would require the help of an apothecary to solve these problems of theirs. The pills that they forged boost the medicinal properties of the herbs, thus creating a greater effect on the cultivators. That's precisely the reason why the Apothecary Guild was extremely crowded. Every day, crowds of people would gather in there for inquiries and procurement of medicine. Zhang Xian's previous self had never been there before. However, as one of the greatest power within the kingdom, he still knew the rough position of it. After walking along the streets for an hour, he arrived at his destination. A magnificent building, as though a massive church. A board hung on top of the entrance, and 2 majestic words were carved on it, Apothecary Guild. Without much hesitation, Zhang Xian walked in. A vast lounge appeared before him the moment he entered. The interiors of the Apothecary Guild was bustling with people walking to and fro. I should either inquire with an apothecary or look up books on pills if I want to know what kinds of pills can awaken the emperor bloodline and purine body. Zhang Xian's main goal for coming here was to look into this matter rather than to purchase pills. There were only 2 methods for him to fulfill his objective here. However, he didn't know a single person in the Apothecary Guild, and it wasn't suitable for him to ask about it from others. In fact, even if he were to have an acquaintance here, it was unlikely for the other party to have heard of it. After all, emperor bloodline and purine body were extremely rare constitutions. On the other hand, looking for a specific information among countless books might be like searching for a needle in the middle of a deep ocean for the others, but for Zhang Xian, who possesses the cheat known as the Library of Heaven's Path, the situation was vastly different. Thus, making up his mind, he walked forward to the reception of the Apothecary Guild. Chapter 89, Wen Shue's Rage. Wen Shue was a receptionist at the front desk of the Apothecary Guild. Her greatest wish was to become an apothecary. However, it was a pity that she was lacking in talent, and even after numerous tries, she still had yet to pass the examination to become an apprentice. Helpless, she could only work at the front desk while trying her best to study. Working as a receptionist at the front desk of the Apothecary Guild might seem like nothing, but the income was truly not bad. She would get a commission on every pill sold, and while the commission isn't a large sum, the more pills were sold, the more she would earn. Thus, her salary in a single year tend to be 6 or 7 times of those working in the same job. However, despite the generous pay, she didn't want to stay in this job for a single day longer. It wasn't because of the difficulty of the job but rather her outer appearance. She was in her early 20s, the pinnacle of her youth and beauty. Furthermore, her parents had gifted her with a spectacular face. While it might not be top-notch, it could be considered as 1 in 100. Being beautiful should have been a blessing. As long as one was a woman, one would be proud of it. However, it would be a totally different matter if the woman were to work here. Often having to stand in the front lines in receiving customers, countless young masters of distinguished families would intentionally run over here to chat her up, coming up with all kinds of ridiculous demands. There were even a few who were incredibly persistent, visiting her every single day and using every single trick in the book, leaving her incredibly annoyed. However, as a salesperson, she wasn't allowed to chase them away. If she were to do so and her pursuers claimed that they were only here to purchase pills, she would be in for a lot of trouble. Let's hope that I will not meet those shameless flies today. Muttering under her breath, she tidied up her uniform and stood at the reception with a smile. Soon afterward, a young man walked over. This young man didn't seem too old, probably below 20. His complexion was well maintained, smooth and radiant even when compared to hers. "Mister, is there anything that you need?" Wen Shui flashed a businesslike smile at him. "Do you all sell books here?" "Those kind about the effects of pills that awaken unique constitutions," the young man said. The young man was Zhang Xian. As his previous self had never been here, he didn't know how the Apothecary Guild worked, so he could only inquire at the front reception. "Please head to the bookstore if you wish to purchase books, this is the Apothecary Guild." Upon hearing the other party's words, the smile Wen Shui was hanging on her face collapsed and her complexion turned awful. "Even if you want to hit on me, you should be more professional about it. Asking about books at the Apothecary Guild, why don't you buy shoes at a restaurant?" "No, that's not it. I am here to look for books on the effects of pills, such books surely cannot be found in the bookstore." Not noticing the sudden changes that have occurred with the attitude of the female receptionist, Zhang Xian contemplated for a moment before asking again. "Since you want to put on a show, I will quietly watch your monologue." With her arms akimbo, Wen Shui's eyes emanated cold intent. Seeing the other party remaining silent to his words, Zhang Xian thought that she did not understand his words. Thus, he continued explaining, "Actually, I want to look for pills that can awaken unique constitutions. However, I am unsure of the herbs that are compatible with them, so I would like to browse through some books. Do you have any of them here? I am willing to buy them off you, or else just borrowing them to take a look is fine as well." "I have already said, there isn't any. Now that I'm ignoring you, you become even more aggressive. Buying books and borrowing books, do you think that you can fool a girl with such old lines?" Wen Shui has already decided that this fellow is here to cause trouble to attract her attention. Otherwise, who would run to the Apothecary Guild to buy books? Wasn't he looking for a beating like this? At this moment, Zhang Xian noticed the snappish attitude of the other party. He couldn't help but be bewildered by her queer actions. He didn't offend her, so why would she behave like this? It might be menopause. Shaking his head, he didn't allow the issue to linger in his mind. As a civilized and wise transcender, he couldn't be bothered to squabble with a woman over such a minor affair. If Wen Shui were to know of his thoughts, she would surely be driven mad. "I am just 20, okay? You are the one who is having menopause. How about this, the Apothecary Guild should have a book collection vault, right? Can you bring me over to take a look?" Know that it was impossible to explain his way through the matter, Zhang Xian mused for a moment and arrived at a solution. Regardless of whether it was the Teacher Guild or Apothecary Guild, they were established for the convenience of the respective occupations. Thus, it was natural for them to have a book collection vault in the building so that those treading on the path of these unique occupations and continue to study and improve. Even if the other party was unwilling to sell these books to him, as long as he was able to take a look around the book collection vault, he should be able to achieve his goals. Book collection vault. You still wish to enter the book collection vault? Seeing how the request of the fellow before her was getting more and more ludicrous, Wen Shui spoke in a sharp tone, "If you aren't here to buy pills, please leave." "Why, you are banning people from entering the book collection vault. How much money does it take to enter it? It is not like I am unwilling to pay for the entry." Zhang Xian was displeased. Was there something wrong with this woman? He was just here to inquire about some matter, and yet the other party reacted as though she had eaten gunpowder or something. Upon hearing the other party acting haughtily the way young masters of distinguished families do, viewing money as though dirt, Wen Shui was even more repulsed. "So what if you have money? Do you think that money makes the world go round? Let me tell you the truth, the Apothecary Guild does have a book collection vault and it is split into basic and advanced tiers. Even the basic tier book collection vault requires one to be an apprentice apothecary before he is able to enter. Are you an apothecary? Or are you an apprentice apothecary?" "Apprentice apothecary?" Zhang Xian was stunned for a moment before coming to a realization. He didn't know much about the Apothecary Guild, but at the very least, he knew about the situation in the academy. The students have a compendium pavilion of their own and the teachers another one of their own, and the latter required a teaching license to enter. Otherwise, if everyone was allowed to browse through as they please, then those secret manuals could no longer be referred to as such. Furthermore, browsing through them was one thing, but if a student were to fancy a cultivation technique written in one of the books and cultivate it on a whim, who could they push the responsibility to if his cultivation were to go berserk? The Apothecary Guild should be the same as well. The rationale behind splitting the book collection vault into the basic and advanced tier and limiting the access to it to only those who have reached a certain standard was to prevent people from getting greedy and only pick out bits and pieces of it to form incomplete knowledge, which could prove to be dangerous. At the same time, they could also prevent the secret manuals from leaking out. Apprentice Apothecary, I am not it, but can anyone take the examinations? He was just an ordinary teacher who had never learned pill forging before. As such, it was impossible for him to be an apprentice apothecary. However, these were all just titles which one could take a test for, and to become a master teacher, he needed to accumulate even more knowledge. Examination. You wish to take the test to become an apprentice apothecary? At this moment, Wen Shui, who was absolutely certain that the other fellow is here to hit on her, seethed in anger. Seeing how the other party was continuing on with his facade and even declaring his intention to take the examination to become an apprentice apothecary, she could no longer suppress her rage any further. Fine. The test is over there, I will take you over right now. Aren't you good at acting? I will bring you over right now, let's see whether you can continue acting like this. Even though it was just an examination for an apprentice apothecary, it was similar to an assistant master-teacher selection in the sense that it required one go through numerous trials, assessed on all kinds of basic knowledge an apothecary had to know. She had already taken the test for numerous years now, only to fail dismally. Yet, you, a playboy who has never gone for any lessons for the apprentice examinations or read any books on medicinal herbs or pill forging, hope to take the test as well? What kind of joke is this? If I don't expose your fraud and humiliate you in public, you might just take me as an easy target. Wen Shui's lips pouted as she harumphed coldly. The test is over there. Why? Chickening out. Wen Shui sneered coldly. Great. Seeing the other party behave as though she had eaten gunpowder, Zhang Xian shook his head. Just as he was about to follow behind her, he suddenly looked over with an awkward expression. Examination. What contents are tested in the apprentice apothecary examination? Do I have to read any books? Chapter 90, Examination Hall. It was one thing if she didn't hear those words. Now, upon hearing these words, Wen Shui felt as though someone was beating on her chest and she was on the verge of erupting. Hitting on me? I will tolerate it. Your intentional rambling. I will tolerate it as well. However, to win my favor, you should at least feign to be knowledgeable. You claim to want to be an apprentice apothecary, yet you are unaware of the basic contents that are being tested, not even knowing what books to read. Do you dare to shout those words out any louder? Why? You also don't know? Fine, I will ask someone else then. Seeing the intense movements at her chest as though it was a ventilation fan, Zhang Xian felt a little indignant and depressed. What is wrong with this lady? If you know about it, just explain it to me. Why do you have to make a big fuss over everything as though you just had a seizure? Seeing how the other party was behaving as though saying, if you don't know anything, don't confuse me, Wen Shui almost turned insane. Fine, continue putting on your facade then. We will see in a while how you embarrass yourself. In the examination to become an apprentice apothecary, one has to remember the medicinal properties of over 100,000 of medicinal herbs, as well as the history and founding of apothecaries. Forcefully suppressing the rage from erupting, Wen Shui started to explain. Apothecary was a job that involves medicinal herb. If one was incapable of even identifying and differentiating the herbs, how could one forge pills? The continent was vast and boundless. There were countless medicinal herbs in it, and even though 100,000 might seem like a huge quantity, it could only be considered as the basics. Despite accompanying medicinal herbs their entire life, some apothecaries were still unable to recognize quite a few of them, needless to say, the apprentices. Just these. That's simple. Where can I find books on medicinal herbs? I will take a look on them right now. Upon hearing the explanation, Zhang Xian was taken aback by the simplicity of the examination. As long as there were books on it, the Library of Heaven's Path was able to compile books inside his head and be stored in his brain as his knowledge. As long as only these contents were tested, the examination could be considered as easy to him. After all, this was an ability much more incredible than photographic memory. Simple. The corner of Wen Shui's mouth twitched. If not in consideration of the fact that the other party was a customer and she was only a receptionist, she would have long assaulted him. Just remembering 100,000 medicinal herbs was an extremely daunting task. Furthermore, every single medicinal herb had different traits and different reactions would arise when different medicinal herbs were mixed with a specific medicinal herb. Even though Wen Shui self-acknowledged that she had a good memory, she was still unable to remember them all even after several years, and she would easily get confused between the different herbs during the examination. He, a playboy who only knows how to flirt with girls, actually said that the test is easy. Continue acting. I'll see how you intend on wrapping up the situation later. There are books on sale at where the apprentice apothecary examination is held. Come with me. Upon coming to a conclusion that the other party was intentionally bragging to capture her attention, Wen Shui's rage calmed down slightly. Sneering coldly, she led Zhang Xian over. Soon, they arrived at a spacious room. At the top, 2 words, "Examination Hall," was written. A middle-aged man was sitting by the entrance while reading a book. The examination hall was a place where apprentice apothecaries were being tested. As such, outsiders were usually forbidden from entering the premises. This middle-aged man was also one of those who wished to become an apprentice apothecary. Even after persisting for over 20 years, he had still yet to succeed. Similar to Wen Shui, he was studying alongside his work. For someone to be unable to pass the examination even after 20 years, the difficulty of the examination was clear to see. Uncle Li. Wen Shui stopped before the middle-aged man and greeted him. You're here. Are you here to buy books or for the examination? The middle-aged man named Uncle Li raised his head and smiled. Not me, it is this Mr. over here. He says that he wishes to take the apprentice apothecary examination. Sneering coldly in her mind, Wen Shui pointed to Zhang Xian. Didn't you say that you want to take the examination? Fine, I will register you right now. Let's see how you intend to resolve the situation given how ignorant you are. The questions for the examination are brainstormed by the apothecaries themselves. Yet, you dare to charge in here despite not knowing anything at all. This is equivalent to challenging their dignity. Let's see how you cry after you incur their wrath. You wish to take the examination. The middle-aged man looked at Zhang Xian and frowned. He had studied for 20 years and yet, he had yet to pass the examination. This fellow looked barely 18 to 19 and he intended to take the examination? Yes. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Only when he became an apprentice apothecary could he enter the Apothecary Guild's basic tier library to browse their books. Without a choice, he could only give it a try. If the other two were to know of his thoughts, they would definitely spurt blood and die from excessive blood loss. All of us study every day to memorize those contents, spending several decades of efforts only to end in vain. Yet, despite not reading a single book, you intend to go for the examination, not to mention just to give it a try. Are you sure it is okay to be acting cool like this? The registration fee is 2,000 gold coins. If you pass the examination, the money will be refunded to you. However, if you fail, the money will be the Apothecary Guild's. This is to prevent others from wasting resources here despite not knowing anything at all. Upon seeing him confirm his intention, the middle-aged Uncle Li mentioned the rules for the registration of the examination. All right. Zhang Xian casually whipped out $2,000 notes and passed it over. After the treasure speculation and the incident with the scammer Yang Mo, he had earned quite a wealth. 2,000 gold coins meant nothing much to him. As expected, he is a rich playboy. Seeing him hand over the money so casually without a shred of hesitation, Wen Shui was even more ascertain of her judgment. 2,000 gold coins. If it was them, they would have to work for quite a period of time before they could whip out such a sum. This fellow was obviously doing this to catch her attention. To hand over this sum of money so easily, what could he be if not a playboy? However, it was a pity that he used the money incorrectly. Not only would it not generate the effects he had intended, he would also become a laughingstock. Taking the money over, Uncle Li nodded his head and passed a personal particulars form to Zhang Xian. After which, he said, "It just happens that there is an examination that will be held today. However, there is still 4 hours before its start, so you just have to return within 4 hours." 4 hours? A trip from the academy toward here took an entire 2 hours, so naturally, he couldn't head back now. Looking at the middle-aged man, he asked, "Is there any books for those taking the apprentice apothecary examination? Can I take a look at them here? You wish to do a last-moment sharpening of your knowledge?" "Sure. That room is full of books, so you can feel free to pick any book of your choice. However, studying 4 hours from the examination seems a little too late." As he spoke, Uncle Li pointed towards Zhang Xian's back. Turning around to take a look, he saw a huge collection of books filling up dozens of bookshelves behind him. From the looks of it, there were at least 10,000 books over there. So many. It was no wonder that the apprentice apothecary examination wasn't easy. Just finishing these books were enough to tire a person to death. Needless to say, remember them. I will just take a casual look. I won't be buying any of it, at which, Zhang Xian walked into the room. To him, there was no point in purchasing books. Just by flipping through it, he was able to imprint the knowledge into the library to become his own, so there's no use in buying them. Seems like you are quite tolerant. Today, I will go all out with you, let's see how long you can keep up your facade for. Seeing how the other party walking in and saying that he would take a look even after seeing so many books stacked on the bookshelves, Wen Shui didn't leave and instead, sneered coldly at his back. To tell the truth, she had seen many shameless people, but she had never seen such a shameless person. Despite not knowing anything at all, he brazenly registers himself for the apprentice apothecary examination. Not only so, he still publicly declares that he is going to study. If it wasn't to put on an act, anyone who sees the amount of book on the bookshelf would feel a little conscience-stricken upon seeing that number of books and think that it is an impossible mission. Nearly 10,000 books, it takes nearly half a day just to move them all, needless to say, to read them. Since you are so shameless, I will quietly watch by the side at how you will continue to act cool. Even if my wage today is deducted, I must see you make a fool out of yourself. Let's see how you will deal with the embarrassment 4 hours from now. Wen Shui's wrath had been incurred quite a fair bit, and she intended to go until the end with that fellow. Chapter 91, 3 rounds of examination. In his previous life, Zhang Xian was a bachelor and had never dated anyone. Thus, he was incapable of guessing the thoughts of a woman. Needless to say, fathom that he had infuriated the receptionist Wen Shui to the verge of exploding in a mere 10 minutes. However, even if he were to know, it didn't make a difference. After all, beauty cannot be eaten anyway. Besides, you are thousands of miles off in comparison with Shen Laoshi and Huang Yu, so where does your self-confidence come from? At this moment, he didn't have any spare effort to be thinking about these though. After walking into the room, he headed to the first row of the bookshelves, casually grabbed a dozen of books and lightly flipped through them. After which, he hurriedly placed them back in position before doing the same with another dozen of books. Walala! Walala! Along with the ceaseless sound of book flipping, books were swiftly being compiled in the library of Heaven's Path. Zhang Xian read the book as he imprinted them in his head. He could tell that it was just as the receptionist said, these were all the most basic knowledge that an apothecary needed to know. It contained the methods to differentiating different medicinal herbs, their detailed explanation, properties, types, effects when put together with others' herbs, and whether the effects would be in conflict with one another. If he had to memorize them manually, he would surely find it difficult to accomplish even when he tired himself to death. It was no wonder that the position of apothecaries was so well respected. Just to become an apprentice, they had to put in a lot more effort than the other occupations in order to remember this vast amount of knowledge. What is he doing? Wen Shui had been wanting to see Zhang Xian make an embarrassment out of himself. However, at this moment, looking at him flip through the books, seemingly without the intention to study them, her beautiful eyes blinked in incomprehension. Perhaps he is just trying to look for a specific book to read. Ignore him. The middle-aged man Uncle Li glanced at him before picking up a book and passed it over to her. Take a look at it as well. Time is precious. One additional sentence memorized may just happen to be the determining factor in the results of the exam. Wen Shui nodded her head. Grabbing the book, she started to absorb herself in it. All occupations required one to have unwavering determination to study. It was impossible for one to soar to the heavens in one go, and apothecaries were the same as well. When forging pills, a single formula tended to require more than 100 of medicinal herbs. If one were to fail in recognizing even a single herb, it would cause all of the herbs, which they spent countless gold coins to buy, become useless trash. Thus, it was especially unbecoming for an apothecary to be ignorant or negligent. Soon, 4 hours passed. At the same time, Zhang Xian happened to be flipping through the last few books on the bookshelves as well, and he heaved a sigh of relief. It is no wonder that master teachers are so rare. Not speaking of any other occupations, just apothecary itself is such a profound occupation. An epiphany struck Zhang Xian. Teachers, the imparter of knowledge and heritage, were required in every single occupation. Formidable master teachers were well versed in all occupations. That was to say, not only could a master teacher guide a person in his cultivation, he was also able to offer pointers in pill forging, smithing, formation and such. This was precisely the reason why the occupation was so well respected and was regarded as the top of the upper 9 paths. Initially, Zhang Xian thought that pill forging would be an easy task. As long as one possessed the pill formula, followed it step by step and added in the herbs systematically, the pill should be formed. However, from the looks of it now, that wasn't the case at all. The maturity of a medicinal herb affected the herb's properties as well. As such, when it is added along with other herbs, it would result in all kinds of different reaction. If one only knew the sequence to adding the herbs, it was impossible for them to successfully forge the pill they are aiming to create. Just pill forging itself was such a complicated process. It was truly amazing how the more formidable master teachers were able to wield the knowledge of numerous occupations at the tip of their mind. Upon walking out of the room, Zhang Xian saw Wen Shui standing not too far away with a cold and supercilious expression. You must have thought that I wouldn't be here. What matter of mine is it whether you are here or not? Zhang Xian looked over speechlessly. I only want to take the apprentice apothecary examination, your presence shouldn't make a difference at all. Continue acting then. I'll see how you will cry in a moment's time. Wen Shui gritted her teeth. The examinations are about to begin, let's go in. The middle-aged man ushered him in. Ignoring the self-assuming woman, Zhang Xian walked into the room. The room wasn't large, just a few dozen meters square large. There were a few people who were already seated inside, and what was common of them all was that a nervous expression painted their faces. Soon, an elderly walked in. That is the only one-star intermediate stage apothecary of Tianxian Kingdom's Apothecary Guild, Senior Ouyang Cheng, as well as the head of Tianxian Kingdom's branch. That's right. I thought that it would be Apothecary Du Man, I didn't expect that it would be him. Crap, I heard that he is reputed to be strict. Now, all possibility of passing the exam by luck is gone. Upon catching sight of the elderly, despondent expressions appeared on the faces of the few seated in the room. Just like master teachers, apothecaries were classified based on stars as well, and 1 star was the lowest rank. Even so, given how Tianxian Kingdom didn't even have a 1-star master teacher, possessing a 1-star apothecary was already not bad. Ignoring the mutterings of the crowd, Ouyang Cheng walked into the room, swept through the room with his gaze and said, "I'm sure you all are confident in your abilities to join in this examination." Everyone felt a little awkward. No one dared to say that they were 100% certain that they would pass the examination. "Since all of you are here for the examination, I will make things clear. If I were to catch any of you cheating, you will be banned from the examination for life." Ouyang Cheng gestured grandly, creating an intimidating aura. "Yes." The crowd nodded their head hurriedly. Seeing them agree to it, Ouyang Cheng nodded his head in approval. "Now that I am done with the rules, I will talk about the contents of the examination. There are 3 rounds to the examinations. Firstly, written paper. Questions on medicinal herbs will be randomly tested in it, and one can only be considered to have passed if you were to be right for at least 90% of the questions. Secondly, medicinal herb discernment time trial. You will be given a few herbs, and within a fixed period of time, you have to determine what herb it is and what kind of properties and effects it possesses. The requirements for this test is higher, and one has to be 100% correct. The third test is much more easy, cultivation realm inspection. One must be at least Fighter 3 Danjinchi realm pinnacle. Why is there such a requirement? Simple, as an apprentice apothecary, one would be sent to do odd jobs for an apothecary. If your cultivation realm is too lacking, how can you have the strength to move cauldrons or to swiftly differentiate herbs? Those who were for the examination had been studying for numerous years, so they were well aware of the flow of the examination. Only Zhang Xian was foreign to it. However, after hearing the explanation, he came to a comprehension. It's actually quite simple. As long as I were to get everything right, I will be able to pass the examination. It isn't as difficult as I thought it would be. Since everyone has understood the rules and the contents of the examination, let's start with the first round, written paper. The duration is 2 hours. After which, Ouyang Cheng passed the examination paper down. After taking a look at it, the corners of Zhang Xian's mouth twitched. The test paper was a thick stack consisting of at least several dozens of paper. Several dozens of test paper within 2 hours? Why did this scene seem weirdly reminiscent to that of his previous life? He didn't expect that after becoming a teacher upon transcending to a foreign world, he would still have to undergo examinations. He found the situation a little peculiar. You may begin answering the question. After giving out the papers, Ouyang Cheng ignored the rest of them and stood coldly at one corner with his hands behind his back. Even though he wasn't looking at the examinees, if someone were to cheat, the perpetrator would surely be discovered and expelled from the examination hall. However, it didn't really matter to Zhang Xian since he didn't have any intentions to cheat anyway. Lowering his head, his attention focused onto the test paper. Flaws. Upon picking up the paper, he shouted out loud in his mind. Then, his mind jolted and a book appeared. After taking a look, Zhang Xian was at a loss of whether he should be laughing or crying. Written in the book was, Tianxian Kingdom Apothecary Guild's Apprentice Apothecary Test Papers. Made from a 1mo craftsman in Bai mill using straws. Flaws. Number 1, the quality of the paper is too inferior, making it unsuitable for storage. Also, it attracts bugs easily. No. 2, it doesn't hold onto ink very well, making it easy for it to smudge. The heck, what I want are answers, not the flaws of the material of this paper. Suppressing the urge to vomit blood, Zhang Xian ignored the book and focused on the questions on it instead. Chapter 92, Just Give Up. Describe the different classification of green-leafed grass and the unique traits of gray earth flower. How many medicinal herbs can the swineheart leaf be complemented with? Questions filled the examination papers densely. Just like the receptionist Wen Shui said, they were all related to medicinal herbs. Search. Upon seeing these questions, Zhang Xian's mind jolted. Different books came flying over from the shelves and stopped right before him before flipping open. The green-leafed grasses have different stems and can be classified as purple stems, yellow stems and black stems. The unique traits of the gray earth flower are, as he looked at the contents of the books in his mind, Zhang Xian's hands moved quickly as he swiftly answered those questions. He was used to using mechanical pens in his previous life and as such, brush was a difficult tool for him to use. However, as his previous self had specially learned how to use it before, his handwriting was still legible. Walala. As he was filling in the blanks and reading through the questions too quickly, the sound of pages flipping echoed through the air. Other people depended solely on their memories to answer questions and as such, they had to struggle hard to jot the respective knowledge in their minds. On the other hand, with the Library of Heaven's Path in his hands, he was able to obtain the answer to the questions instantaneously without even thinking. It was no different from copying from the answer key. The speed he was going through his paper at left others with gaping mouths. Upon scanning the surroundings to see how the examinees were faring in the examination, Ouyang Cheng caught sight of Zhang Xian and frowned. His face darkened. Looks like it is another scion trying his luck. In every apprentice apothecary examination, there were quite a few people who joined the examination to try their luck despite knowing that it was impossible for them to pass. These people tended to be from wealthy families and cared not for the 2,000 gold coins entrance fee. They just hoped to analyze the type of questions so that they could memorize contents specifically against those questions. Ouyang Cheng despised such people. These people hope to make it big without putting in effort. How can one possibly become an apprentice apothecary without memorizing the 100,000 types of medicinal herbs, relying on sheer luck instead? The type of questions and the question itself changes in every single examination. There hasn't ever been a reused question before, so it doesn't matter how many times you come. Looks like it is about time to clamp down on those who are coming for the examination with this kind of mindset. Otherwise, if they were to come for the examinations every time just because they have the money to do so, we will become the laughingstock of the other occupations. Flinging his sleeve, he harumphed in his mind. Although it was impossible to test the unique properties and traits of the 100,000 medicinal herbs in the test paper, the questions in the paper were varied and the scope was wide. If one didn't have a deep understanding of medicinal herbs and their properties, it was impossible to score 90% and above. Given Zhang Xian's young age and his random flipping and answering of the question without contemplating deeply into them, he was immediately labeled as an opportunistic and indolent scion. The greatest taboo of an apothecary was to pretend to be knowledgeable despite being ignorant. If one were to be negligent and make an error, even if it was just a seemingly slight one, it could cause person's death. That was precisely the reason why the examinee's personality, attitude, and meticulousness were being assessed on top of the 3 rounds of tests of the apprentice apothecary examination. A fellow like the one before him who flipped through the papers and filled them in casually without reading the question properly was surely one who has an attitude problem. Without even marking the papers, he had already given Zhang Xian a failing grade in the depths of his heart. This wasn't because he was being too assuming. Have you ever seen a person who answers a question without even reading through it properly? Have you ever seen a person whose brush goes flying about the paper without even requiring to muse over the problem? An answer without contemplation is surely nonsense. No one else would have the confidence to have answered all the questions accurately. In less than an hour, Zhang Xian had finished filling in the several dozens of paper. Sighing a breath of relief, Zhang Xian looked through the paper once more and upon confirming that there was no problem in it, he submitted it. Submitting the paper so quickly. Perhaps, he knows that it is impossible to pass, so he decided to simply give up. To tell the truth, the examination is too difficult. It is normal to give up. Giving up the examination is nothing much, but the problem is that the examiner is Senior Ouyang. I think this lad is in for a ride of misfortune. Upon seeing Zhang Xian handing the papers over, a commotion broke out among the examinees. For a 2-hour paper to be submitted in less than an hour, this was something unprecedented in the apprentice apothecary examination. Everyone thought that it wasn't that he was finished with the paper, but rather, he was incapable of answering it and did not have the confidence to continue on with it. When will the next round of examinations begin? Ignoring the commotion of the crowd behind him, Zhang Xian passed the papers over to Ouyang Cheng and asked. Time would be required in the marking of the papers after the papers were collected. If he knew what time the next examination would be held, he could wait at the predetermined location beforehand. It was one thing if he didn't ask, but upon hearing these words, Ouyang Cheng felt rage flurrying within him, threatening to burst from his body. Given how ignorant you are, filling in everything so arbitrarily, even if there is a next round of examinations, it should have nothing to do with you. Only those who pass the first round of the apprentice apothecary examination can carry on into the second round. Given your standards, you still dare to inquire about the next round of examinations. Are you daydreaming? However, no matter what, he was a formal apothecary. Even though he was angry, he wouldn't stoop down to the level of venting his anger on a small figure who had yet to even reach the level of an apprentice. Gesturing outwards, he said, "Wait outside. If you were notified, it would mean that you have passed the examination. If not, you can return home." Oh. Zhang Xian nodded his head and walked out of the room. Arrogant. After his departure, Ouyang Cheng crushed his paper into a ball and threw it into the corner. There was no need to read the papers of such people, it would just add to his wrath. Zhang Xian walked out of the room. Possessing the library of Heaven's Path, those questions in the exam that tested one's knowledge could not be any easier for him. You have submitted your papers. Isn't the test a 2-hour one? Why are you out in a single hour? Upon seeing him walk out of the examination hall, the middle-aged man Uncle Li was astonished. The number of questions in the apprentice apothecary examination was massive. He could only barely finish the papers every time within the allocated time for 2 hours. In fact, he didn't even manage to read a few questions, resulting in inaccurate answers and his failure in the examinations. Wasn't it too fast for him to walk out in just a single hour? Do you even have to ask about it? He must have found the paper too difficult and gave up on it. Wen Shui scoffed. Aren't you good at acting? Despite not knowing anything at all, you insisted on wanting to take the apprentice apothecary examination. You should know how tough the exam is now. Hee hee. Despite hearing her contemptuous words, Zhang Xian couldn't be bothered to explain. Besides, even if he were to explain, the other party wouldn't believe it. Rather than wasting his effort to explain it to them, he might as well wait for the results. By then, everything would be clear. Why? Conscience-stricken. If you don't have the capabilities, you shouldn't be feigning so. See, now you can't continue on with the act any longer. In Wen Shui's eyes, that expression on Zhang Xian's face was one who is embarrassed. If there is something wrong with your head, you should hurry and get it checked out instead of nagging here. Zhang Xian was a little speechless. From the moment they met, this woman seemed to be all out against him, as though he had done something unbecoming to her. She must really be sick. No matter how hard Zhang Xian tried to jog his memory, his previous self didn't seem to be acquainted with her either. Since they were unacquainted, why was she looking for trouble with him? Zhang Xian was stumped. Initially, she thought that this fellow would find the nearest hole to hide out of shame upon being exposed. Yet, this fellow still brazenly dared to say that there was something wrong with her head. You are the one who is sick. Your entire body is full of sickness. Wen Shui's breathing quickened due to her anger. Her proud chests undulated up and down and she looked as though she was on the verge of erupting. Oh, I know. A thought flashed through Zhang Xian's mind. He finally understood why the other party kept provoking him. With a bemoaning look in his eyes, he shook his head and with a sincere voice, he said. Your provocations won't attract my attention and win my fancy. Such thinking is childish. Let me tell you straight on, this will only incur my ire. At this point, he sighed. I only like gentle and elegant ladies. It is impossible for me to like you, so just give up. Chapter 93, marking the examination papers. In his previous life, when he was a middle schooler, he once had a crush on a girl and intentionally tried to perform before her even if it meant going against her. This was all just to capture her attention. From the very beginning, this woman had been going against him no matter what he did. It was highly probable that she might be up to the same thing as well. Otherwise, was there a need for her to treat him with such ill attitude? Sigh, you aren't ugly yourself, there must be many males pursuing you, so why must you get so obsessed over me? Zhang Xian felt incomparably complexed. Looks like being pursued by others wasn't anything good either. The pressure on a transcender was as heavy as a mountain. Give up. Wen Shui staggered. She felt a mouthful of fresh blood regurgitating in her mouth, threatening to spit out at any moment. You were the one who was trying to attract my attention to get on my good books, all right? When did I become the one who intentionally caused you trouble? The heck? Explain yourself. What does that look of pity mean? What the heck do you mean by that I should give up on you? No matter what, I am a beauty who is pursued by many. How did it turn out as though I am unable to be wedded and had to latch onto you? Grinding her teeth, Wen Shui's face twitched and the wrath raging within her was on the verge of erupting. Just when she was about to lose control over her emotions and attack this self-assuming man, the young man shook his head, walked towards a bench by the side and sat on it. His footsteps were light and inconspicuous. Wen Shui, this is the entrance of the examination hall. If an apothecary were to see it, it would be difficult for you to take the exam in the future. Uncle Li spoke up. Yes. Upon hearing his words, Wen Shui could only forcefully suppress the rage within her and sit down quietly. This was the entrance of the examination hall and apothecaries often appeared here. If they were to see her fighting out of rage with another person, she would definitely leave a bad impression with them. If so, it would be difficult for her to pass the apprentice apothecary examination in the future. Fine, I'll let you off for now. When the results come out later on, look at how I'll teach you a lesson. Glaring coldly at the self-assuming fellow, Wen Shui clenched her jaws furiously. Couldn't be bothered with this woman who had a crush on him. Zhang Xian sat on the bench and began to organize the knowledge within his head. Most of the information on the medicinal herbs were the crystallization of the knowledge of numerous predecessors, so there weren't many mistakes in them. Zhang Xian isolated the remaining few mistakes and studied them carefully. When his consciousness was still absorbed in the library of Heaven's Path, the examination came to an end. It was finally time for everyone to submit the papers. Wait at the entrance. Those who passed the examination will be notified to attend the next round. Ouyang Cheng shook his hand and chased out the crowd. Picking up a brush, he started to mark the papers one by one. As he marks, his eyebrows slowly knitted together and his complexion darkened. Brother Ouyang, how is it? Is there anyone who passed the examinations this time? I happen to need an apprentice. Just when he was done marking all of the papers, a middle-aged man walked in. The other one-star apothecary of the Apothecary Guild, do man pass? Look at these answers are all gibberish. If they were to be accepted as apprentices, the Apothecary Guild will be shamed. Putting the brush by one side, Ouyang Cheng picked up the stack of the marked examination paper and lashed out furiously. Let me take a look. Du Man walked to the table and flipped through the marked examination paper. In a short moment, he frowned a well. In their perspective, the questions in the examinations weren't too difficult. However, the answers the examinees wrote in were all around the place, they even answered the properties of common medicinal herbs wrongly. If these kind of people were to accepted by apprentices, it would definitely stain the reputation of the Apothecary Guild. What's wrong with this paper? Brother Ouyang, you didn't mark this one. He was unable to find a single satisfactory one even after flipping through 7 to 8 papers. Suddenly, Apothecary Du Man caught sight of the crumpled examination paper by the desk. The answers on the paper weren't marked at all. It is the paper of a playboy, so the results must be even worse than the others. It is clear that he wouldn't pass even if I don't look through it. Rather than get angry while marking it, I might as well just leave it there. Remembering the fellow who sped through the paper, Ouyang Cheng's mood took a dive. A fellow who submitted his papers after answering the questions for an hour, it is obvious that he won't pass the examinations. There's no need to mark the papers at all. What is going on? The previous 2 examinations, there were at least 3 to 4 people who were able to pass the first round. Yet, this time, after spending so much time marking the paper, only 2 people were qualified for the next round. The scripts of the other examinees were all a mess. Playboy? Let me see what kind of script would cause you to determine his failure without even looking at it. Du Man shook his head with a smile on his face as he casually flipped open the papers. A moment after his gaze falls on the paper, he exclaimed in shock. Voila! Voila! As the sound of the flipping of papers echoed in the room, the shock on Du Man's face deepened. His nonchalant expression gradually turned grim. What's wrong? Are the answers provided by this fellow too ridiculous? Taking the expression of his colleague in sight, Ouyang Cheng harumphed. Just an ignorant playboy who makes use of his money to join the examination. He truly has no respect for the Apothecary Guild. That's not it, brother Ouyang, take a look at it. Hearing the furious complaints of the other party, Du Man hurriedly interrupted him and passed the paper over to him. What's there to see? No matter what, it is a fail. Muttering for a bit, Ouyang Cheng lowered his head to look at the papers. With a single glance, his eyes widened into complete circles just like how Du Man's did a moment ago. He couldn't help but exclaim in shock, oh. Flipping over to the second page, Flipping over to the third page, ah. Flipping over to the fourth page, the heck. Many different expressions flashed through his face, but even so, he continued flipping through the paper quickly. Very soon, he finished looking through the dozens of paper-thick script. Ouyang Cheng's eyes almost fell to the floor. He stared at it with a look of disbelief. How can this be? Not a single error. Indeed. For there to not be a single error. We intentionally left a few difficult questions at some parts, and even if I were to answer it myself, I would have most probably fallen into those traps and commit a mistake. Du Man's face was also filled with incredulity. The reason why he was so confident with the paper was because the questions on this paper were rather abstract, such that even official apothecaries like them would be unable to derive the correct answer without jogging their memory, logically rationalizing from it, and even flipping through the books to double-check their contents. However, not only was there not a single mistake in the answers, they were actually phrased out extremely succinctly. How was this possible? There isn't a single mistake in this paper, brother Ouyang. Why were you so certain that he would be unable to pass the examination? After getting through the shock, Du Man couldn't help but ask him. There was never a candidate in the Tianxian Kingdom Apothecary Guild who answered the examination paper so well before. For brother Ouyang to fail such a genius without even looking at his script, he was too rash. Ouyang's face flushed. He felt so embarrassed that not a single word came out from him for a very long time. He was known for being strict and meticulous, earning the respect of many through such. Yet, today the slap on his face stung as though it was on fire. He clearly saw the fellow finishing the paper in less than an hour without putting much effort into it. How did he get it all right? Even he was unable to accomplish such a feat with that speed. Could it be that the fellow's knowledge had already exceeded that of his? To label a person whose knowledge of medicinal herbs exceeded his as a playboy and a failure? The heck, can reality not be so damned? Ouyang Cheng felt his entire body go stiff, as though constipated. Chapter 94, Discernment Time Trial. Who? Exhaling deeply, Zhang Xian opened his eyes. After a moment of studying, his knowledge of medicinal herbs had deepened significantly. The knowledge in the books he flipped through in the room back then had finally assimilated into his mind and became his. Not only could the Library of Heaven's Path replicate secret manuals and compile the Heaven's Path divine art, it could also hasten the rate which one learnt new knowledge. Dang 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 dang. A series of footsteps could be heard. It is apprentice Zhu Hua Hua, he passed the examination half a year ago. Didn't he become Apothecary Du Man's apprentice? Indeed, he must be here to announce the results. I hope that I am able to pass the examination. Upon seeing the owner of the footsteps, the people outside the examination hall quickly stood up. The results are out now. Finally, your facade will be exposed, let's see whether you can continue on with the act then. Wen Shui sneered as she glanced coldly at the young man beside her. To tell truth, if she didn't know that this fellow was a playboy scion in advance, she would have thought that he might actually possess true capabilities. That was because his acting was way too realistic. In the 2 hours after the examination, he sat on the bench without moving in the least. He truly went all out just to attract her attention. However, it was useless. He had already offended her thoroughly a moment ago. It was impossible to change her perception of him now. There are 3 people who passed the first round of examinations. The apprentice named Zhu Hua Hua walked out of the examination hall with a sheet of paper in his hand. He began to read out the names written on it. Firstly, Sun Tao from Luyuan City. 91 out of 100. Ah, me? I passed. The moment the voice sounded, a young man leapt in joy. His response attracted countless looks of envy from the other examinees. Even though he had only passed one of the 3 rounds, he was at least a step closer to becoming an apprentice apothecary. Even when Shui's eyes were twinkling in respect toward him. Second, Qian Wen Man from Ziyun City. 90 out of 100. It's me. Upon hearing the words, another person stood up with a flushed face. Finally, Zhang Xian from Tianxian City. Suddenly, Zhu Hua Hua's face warped in disbelief. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the paper once more. Only now did he confirm that his sight wasn't playing tricks on him, and with a trembling voice, he said, 100 out of 100. What? 100 out of 100? That means he answered every single question correctly. How is that possible? To be able to achieve a perfect score for such a difficult paper, who is this expert Zhang Xian? Right, who is it? Upon hearing that the 3rd person who passed the examination achieved a perfect score, the entire area exploded into commotion. Everyone looked around to find the person named Zhang Xian. Alright, the 3 people who passed the first round, enter the examination hall for the second round. Zhu Hua Hua interrupted the commotion and walked into the room. The 2 persons whose names were called previously also hurriedly followed behind him. Zhang Xian stood up as well. The names of the 3 people who passed the examination has already been announced. Why, are you still not going to admit your incapability? Seeing him stand up, Wen Shui sneered coldly. However, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind and she stopped halfway through her words. Her eyes widened into complete circles and with a quivering voice, she asked, what is your name? Zhang Xian. Couldn't be bothered with this shallow woman, Zhang Xian turned around and walked into the examination hall. Zhang Xian. He is Zhang Xian. The one who scored 100 out of 100. Wen Shui shuddered and her face paled ghastly white. In this instant, she felt as though a clown, making a fool out of herself. She kept saying that the other party was putting up a facade and had no abilities whatsoever. In the end he proved her wrong with an unprecedented perfect score. Are you for real? Didn't you know nothing at all before the examination? Weren't you ignorant of what was being tested? You liar, you big liar. Acting as though an ignorant fool, only to score a full mark, brother, you must be joking with me. Wen Shui felt a burning sensation on her face and she felt herself going insane. The fellow who simply flipped through all of the books just now got a perfect score. At the side, Uncle Li's eyes were about to fall to the ground at any moment now. The heck? Just a moment ago, he was thinking that perhaps the other party was here to play. He didn't expect the other party to be such a formidable character. He had never passed the examination despite taking the test frequently ever since he was a teenager. Yet, this fellow received a perfect score in his first attempt. Truly, comparisons between fellow humans were what that turned out to be the most infuriating. It's that fellow who handed up the papers after an hour into the examination. I thought he had given up. To think that he had obtained a perfect score, too incredible. Getting all of the questions correct in just an hour, how did he study to reach such an incredible level? The other examinees also recognized him and a dizzy spell assaulted them. Oblivious to the shock and disbelief of the others outside, Zhang Xian sat down before the desk once more. On the table before him, several rarely seen herbs that could not be seen in the market were laid out before him. There is a total of 10 medicinal herbs on the table. Before this incense burns out, you have to write out its name, properties, and its uses out. For this round, you have to achieve a perfect score to pass. 15 minutes standing at the front, Ouyang Cheng gestured, the time starts now. In the second round, medicinal herb discernment, one had to achieve a perfect score to pass. That is to say, if one recognized even a single of the 10 medicinal herbs inaccurately, one would be disqualified. Zhang Xian looked at the first stalk of herb. It had a green flower, a green stem, and green leaves. Green main grass. Upon recalling such a plant being recorded in the books, a name floated into his mind. Following closely behind, the description of green main grass appeared before him in the Library of Heaven's Path. He casually jotted it down. After he was done with the first one, he proceeded on to the second one. Even though these medicinal herbs were not commonly seen, to him who had an archive in his mind, the examination wasn't difficult at all. Soon, he finished writing down the information of 9 of the plants, with only a single one remaining. This was a bizarre plant with a yellow flower, a gray stem, and white leaves. Just as he was struggling to figure out what plant it was, a thought flashed through his mind and he froze. Smiling bitterly, he patted his forehead. Why didn't he think of it earlier? With the cheating machine called the Library of Heaven's Path, he didn't have to go through so much trouble to discern the medicinal herbs. He stretched out his hands and gently picked up the medicinal herb. Who? A book appeared before him and a detailed explanation of the medicinal herb was compiled within the book, with all of its strengths and flaws recorded within. He casually copied it onto the paper. Then, he touched the other 9 of the herbs to double confirm his answer. The results were exactly as how he discerned it, except for a particular stalk. Zhang Xian knew that it is impossible for the Library of Heaven's Path to make a mistake and thus, he edited his answer. The incense had barely burned halfway through by the time he was finished. He passed the answer sheet. Previously, Ouyang Cheng thought that Zhang Xian was here to fool about, so he didn't have a good opinion of him. However, upon seeing him achieve a perfect score in the first round of examinations, he dared not underestimate him any further and hurriedly picked up his paper to take a look. Apothecary Du Man walked over by the corner to look at the paper as well. The answers on the paper were all correct. They nodded their head in satisfaction as they browsed through his paper. Not just the name, even the properties, unique traits, and uses of the medicinal herb written in the script of the young man were flawless. Just as they were certain that he would pass the examination and were about to offer him compliments, they suddenly paused simultaneously and stared intently at his paper once more. All right, there is only one person who passed the second round of examinations. I will announce his name now, soon, after the remaining 2 candidates handed in their papers. Ouyang Cheng swiftly marked their papers. Then, his gaze swept through the surrounding as he announced the result, Sun Tao from Luyuan City. Chapter 95, Dragon Scale Grass, Me. Sun Tao clenched his fists delightfully. Turning around, he looked at Zhang Xian and the other candidate. His neck was tilted upwards as he emanated an aura of superiority. After getting through the first 2 examinations, his identity as an apprentice was already confirmed. Ignoring the incomparably narcissistic Sun Tao, upon hearing his name wasn't announced, Zhang Xian frowned. That shouldn't be. He had double-checked all of his answers with the Library of Heaven's Path, so it was impossible for him to have committed an error. Why did he fail? Master Apothecaries, may I know where did I go wrong? Unable to contain his doubts, Zhang Xian stepped forward. Why? Are you going to challenge the 2 masters' evaluation? A mistake is a mistake. You must have identified a certain medicinal herb inaccurately or made a mistake while writing your answer down. Sun Tao stepped before him, flung his sleeve and lectured him as though an earnest teacher. Study hard after you return. Theoretical knowledge are different from the practical knowledge after all. Your theoretical answers are not bad, but if you are unable to recognize the medicinal herbs, you are still unable to become an apprentice apothecary. His voice was deep and his actions were refined. Lad, weren't you gleeful just now? It is shocking that you are able to achieve a perfect score in the written examination, but it is useless. You have identified the fish scale grass erroneously, stating it as dragon scale grass instead. Seeing his doubtful expression, Ouyang explained. However, don't be disheartened. Just the very fact that you were able to achieve perfect accuracy in your written examination shows that you have reached an acceptable level of understanding towards medicinal herbs. As long as you observe and study medicinal herbs properly from now on and integrate your knowledge together, you will surely pass the examination the next time around. Indeed, you are still young. There is no need to hurry. As long as you continue to learn humbly and integrate your theoretical knowledge with your technical skills, you should be able to become a true apprentice apothecary very soon. Apothecary Du Man also chipped in. If it was anyone else, the 2 would be less than bothered to explain. However, the person before them had just achieved a perfect score. Even the 2 of them felt that it was a pity for him to fail this round. You mean this? Zhang Xian finally understood why he failed the second round of examination. He headed to the table and picked up the stalk of medicinal herb. Studying it carefully once more, he asked, "Are you sure that this is fish scale grass?" Of course, its stem is similar to that of fish scale and its leaves are gray color. What else could it be if not fish scale grass? Before Ouyang, Cheng and Du Man could answer, Sun Tao quickly spoke out proudly. Fish scale grass was an extremely rare herb and its traits were as what Sun Tao said, fish scale-like stem and gray leaves. Even though it was rare, information on the herb was recorded in the books. The one that Zhang Xian identified inaccurately previously was also this herb. Could it be that it isn't? Ouyang clearly agreed with Sun Tao's judgment, and he stared at Zhang Xian with a doubtful expression. Of course not. Zhang Xian shook his head. Aren't the 2 apothecaries a little too rash to use a herb which you both aren't sure of in an examination and conclude that I have failed the test? Audacious. Thinking that the young man before him was trying to win praises by starting a commotion, he quickly interjected. How could the questions come up by the master apothecaries be wrong? Stop spouting nonsense here. After passing the examination, it was highly likely that he would become the apprentice of one of the 2 apothecaries here, so he had to fawn on them in advance. It is easy to tell whether it is nonsense or not. There are books in the room outside the examination hall. May I busy someone to fetch a book on the bottommost of the 7th shelf here? Couldn't be bothered to argue with this fellow, Zhang Xian calmly said so. Hua, fetch the book here. Ouyang and Du Man traded gazes for a moment before the latter ordered his apprentice to fetch the book. The apprentice apothecary who brought the candidates into the room nodded his head before walking out. In a moment's time, he returned with a book on unique medicinal herbs, the one that Zhang Xian had described previously. Flip to the 17th page, there is a detailed description on fish scale grass there. Zhang Xian said. The apprentice Zhu Hua couldn't resist the urge to flip the book, and in the next instant, information on fish scale grass appeared before him. He can even remember this. The 2 apothecaries, Ouyang and Du Man, glanced over and their bodies shuddered, revealing their incredulity. Fish scale grass was an ingredient that they took randomly, and no one knew about it beforehand. As such, it was impossible for anyone to cheat. To be able to remember which book holds the description of the medicinal herb, which page the description is on and where the book was placed, his memory is nothing short of incredible. May I trouble you to recite the introduction on fish scale grass? Ignoring their shock, Zhang Xian carried on. Fish scale grass usually grows in marshlands. It is named as such due to its unique fish scale-like stem. Its entire body is gray and there are slight white spots on top of the leaves. The scales on mature fish scale grasses are around the size of a soybean. The voice of the apprentice apothecary, Hua Hua, gradually faded away as he recited the introduction. Because, even him, had realized that there were many differences between the fish scale grass on the table and what was described in the book. There are faint white spots on the top of the leaves of fish scale grass, but this herb doesn't have any of it. The scales of a mature fish scale grass should be around the size of a soybean, but the scales on this herb are around the size of a fingernail. It is clear that it is significantly larger than what is being described. Zhang Xian carried the herb up and explained the traits one by one. This Ouyang Cheng and Du Man hurriedly grabbed the book from Zhu Hua Hua's hands and browsed through it. They discovered many differences between what was being described in the book and the herb in Zhang Xian's hands. Since it isn't fish scale grass, it should be something that is similar to it. Of the numerous medicinal herbs, the only thing that resembles it is the dragon scale grass that I had written down in my script. If you all doubt the existence of this medicinal herb, you all can send someone to the room again, and on the right upper corner of the fourth shelf, there should be a famous work by Senior Lu de Xian. The herb is described in detail on the 54th page. Lu de Xian was an extremely famous apothecary 30 years ago. He had entered many barren and treacherous lands to discover new herbs, and he had contributed much to the apothecary society. Of course, if you still doubt that the herb is dragon scale grass, I have a way to discern it for sure. Zhang Xian smiled. Fish scale grass is a warm medicinal herb. A milky white liquid will flow out if its stem is broken. On the other hand, this herb is a cold medicinal herb. If it is cut apart, a pale yellow liquid that emanates cold moist air will flow out. The two apothecaries are expert at using herbs, so you should be able to discern it easily. This Du Man shot a gaze at Zhu Hua Hua to get him to look for the book once more. At the same time, he exerted a force on his hands and lightly tore the plant apart. Pada! The stem of the fish scale grass in his hands was torn apart and a pale yellow liquid flowed out slowly, emitting frigidity into its surroundings. It is as he says. The duo staggered. It is exactly as what the other party said. To think that this medicinal herb isn't fish scale grass. At this moment, Zhu Hua Hua returned with a book in his hand. At the 54th page, records on the dragon scale grass could be found, and the traits stated in the book tallied perfectly with this medicinal herb. Despite being an examiner, to think that a candidate would end up correcting their mistake, Ouyang Cheng and Du Man felt a fiery sensation on their face. The room went deathly silent. Everyone stared at the young man before them as though they were staring at a monster. The heck? Remembering the difference between dragon scale grass and fish scale grass can still be considered minor, but to remember the exact book and page, as well as where it is placed on the shelves, you are about to break through the heavens. Are you sure you are still human? Sun Tao, who had just mocked Zhang Xian in an attempt to perform before the apothecaries, stood rooted to the spot in a daze, and his body trembled uncontrollably. An urge to cry overwhelmed him. Damn it! If only I knew that the other party had such outstanding memorization ability, I wouldn't have tried to look knowledgeable even if I was beaten to death. This time, not only did he fail to look knowledgeable, he looked like a fool. If there was a burrow in the ground at this moment, he surely would have dived in at this very instant. Chapter 96, I will give it a try, it's dragon scale grass. We have made a mistake. After a long moment, Ouyang Cheng said with a bitter smile on his face. As a famous apothecary in Tianxian Kingdom, he had been the one to teach others all along. He didn't expect to be the one taught today. Since it is dragon scale grass, you are the only one who passed the second round, medicinal herb discernment time trial. As long as your cultivation realm is Jinqi realm pinnacle and above, you are officially an apprentice apothecary. Upon hearing these words, Sun Tao was on the verge of bursting into tears. He was probably one of the most tragic candidates ever. His qualification as an apprentice apothecary was cancelled in less than 10 minutes after its announcement, and it was passed on to someone else. Does reality have to be so damned? Does reality have to slap on my face so forcefully? However, even though he still felt discontented with the final verdict, having witnessed Zhang Xian's fearsome memorization ability, he could only swallow his tears back in. To take the examination with this kind of freak, he had to concede to him even if he didn't want to. Later, when the examination ends, I will look for a secluded location and find an opportunity to beat him up. After all, I am nearing 30, 10 years older than the other party. My cultivation realm should be higher than his. Fighter 4 Dan Pigu realm pinnacle, it should be more than enough to teach him a lesson. As such a vile thought appeared in his mind, he immediately heard the voice of the other party. My current cultivation realm is Fighter 5 Dan Dingli realm pinnacle. After which, Zhang Xian revealed his level of cultivation. Guangdang. Sun Tao fell to the floor. Do you need to be so terrifying? Not only is your memory so frightening, your fighting prowess just has to be the same as well. To think that I wanted to teach you a lesson, it is lucky that you revealed your cultivation realm now. Otherwise, I would surely be reduced to the state of a snake melon. Alright, alright. Congratulations on joining the ranks of apprentice apothecaries. Seeing that his cultivation realm fitted the regulations as well, Ouyang Cheng went straight to the point and drew out an emblem from his embrace. This is the emblem of an apprentice apothecary. With this, you can enter the guild's basic tier book collection vault freely. You will also enjoy special privileges and priority when purchasing pills from the guild. The Apothecary Guild usually sold pills to the outsiders at an exorbitant price. On the other hand, those among their ranks would receive a huge discount when purchasing pills. Even though he was just an apprentice apothecary, he could be considered as a member of the guild. Yes. Zhang Xian grabbed the emblem from Ouyang Cheng's hands joyfully. The reason why he exerted so much effort to gain the identity of an apprentice was so that he could enter the book collection vault. Finally, he had achieved his aim. Also, upon becoming an apprentice, you can choose to follow an apothecary so as to better come into contact with pills and study them. Given your talent, I believe that you will be able to become a true apothecary in a few years' time. Ouyang Cheng stared expectantly at Zhang Xian as he said these words. It was very clear that he hoped to admit Zhang Xian as his apprentice. This young man had astounding memorization ability, not to mention his incredible talents. As long as he was guided carefully, he should be able to achieve high heights soon. Having such an apprentice would help boost his fame. Du Man, who was standing by the side, had the same intentions as well, and he stared at him with glowing eyes. Looking at the gazes of the two, Zhang Xian shook his head and replied, I'm sorry, but I do not have any intention of becoming the apprentice of any apothecary for the time being. No matter what, he was a teacher of Hengtian Academy, as well as a transcender. How could he become an errand runner and apprentice of someone else? It would be a joke if he were to. After becoming an apprentice, one had the choice to choose whether he wanted to come under an apothecary or not. Looks like I was too anxious. You have just become an apprentice, so there's no need to think too much into it. You can make a choice after contemplating over the matter properly. Upon Zhang Xian's rejection, Ouyang Cheng realized that he was a little too hasty and he flashed an embarrassed smile. Indeed, you should consider it carefully. It is easier to learn under an apothecary, and you would be able to become a true apothecary faster through so. Du Man nodded his head in agreement. Knowing the intentions of the other party, Zhang Xian nodded his head in response. Suddenly, he recalled something and asked, "Is there any pills in our apothecary guild that can awaken special constitutions?" He had asked a receptionist previously and she didn't seem to know. However, these two over here were true apothecaries of the guild, people of respectable standing. They should at least know a little more than her. Pills that awaken unique constitutions. Ouyang, Cheng and Du Man stared at one another for a moment before the former replied, "There is, but different constitutions require different pills to awaken. If one were to erroneously consume a wrong pill, not only will the constitution not be awakened, it might even result be severe side effects." Having browsed through related books, Zhang Xian understood this fact and continued, "Then are there any books relating to unique constitutions and the pills required to awaken them? Can you allow me to take a look at them?" Yuan Tao possessed the emperor bloodline, and before his unique constitution awakened, it was safer for him for fewer people to know of it. These two apothecaries seemed kind on the surface, but a human's heart was unfathomable. It was hard to say whether revealing the fact to them would bring about a series of trouble. Thus, it was best for fewer people to know of his emperor bloodline. Therefore, he phrased it as a unique constitution and did not reveal any other details about the matter. At most, they would only surmise that he was the one consuming the pill. There are quite a books on them, but they are all in the advanced tier book collection vault. According to the rules, only certified apothecaries are allowed to enter and look through them. Not even I have the qualifications to loan them to you. Ouyang Cheng shook his head. What he said is true. Pills and unique constitutions are something that only qualified apothecaries will research. As such, it is placed in the advanced tier book collection vault. If you really want to take a look at it, you should choose to become the apprentice of one of us. With your talent, you should be able to attempt the examination for a 1-star apothecary within a year's time. Once you succeed, is there still anything that isn't for your browsing? Apothecary Du Man made use of this opportunity to help him analyze the situation. Furthermore, a true apothecary is granted with generous privileges in all apothecary guild. Regardless of whether it is the purchasing of pills or scavenging for herbs, your needs will be prioritized over outsiders. You should consider it carefully. It will be slower if you try to fumble your way through to become an apothecary. Even with your superior talent, it is hard for you to succeed even in a few years' time. They cannot be loaned. Bitterness cloaked Zhang Xian's face. Didn't this mean that his hard work has been in vain? He had wasted quite a bit of time and effort to pass the examination to become an apprentice apothecary. If Sun Tao, Wen Shui, Uncle Li, and the rest were to know his thoughts, blood would definitely spurt forth from their mouth. We spend a minimum of 6 to 7 years memorizing the content in those books, and we haven't even passed the examinations yet. All in all, you have only spent 4 hours. Do you know that 4 hours ago, you don't even know what an apprentice apothecary is? You call this hard work? You dare to call this hard work? Then what is ours called? Indeed. If you wish to look at the books of the advanced tier book collection vault, you have to become an apothecary. This is a rule by the headquarters. If you truly wish to find out how you can utilize pills to awaken unique constitutions, you should first think of a way how you can become an official apothecary. Ouyang Qing said. In his opinion, the only way one could become an apothecary quickly was to learn behind a true apothecary. He was the best apothecary in the entire Tianxian kingdom. Who else could Zhang Xian choose if not him? Just when he was about to offer an apprenticeship to Zhang Xian, he heard the other party speaking up. Since only an apothecary can read books from the advanced tier book collection vault, then how does the examination and apothecary work? Zhang Xian pondered for a moment. Let me give it a try. That decision is a wise one. As long as you follow me, I will expend all my effort in grooming you. What? Halfway through his words, Ouyang Qing realized what Zhang Xian had just said. His voice choked in his throat and his eyes, which were fixated on the young man before him, widened as though they were about to pop out from their sockets. What did you just say? Chapter 97, Pill Debate, Give It a Try. Not only Ouyang Cheng felt as though the world was going mad, Du Man and the rest also felt faint-headed. Brother, do you take apothecaries to be like the cabbages and cucumbers sold in the market, so easily obtainable? Give it a try. Are you playing with me? As one of the highest standing upper nine-path occupations, who didn't study for numerous years and put in effort multiple folds of that imaginable to an ordinary person to join their ranks? Yet, you said to give it a try your head. Do you know the content of the examination? Do you know how can one become a true apothecary? Cough cough cough. Ouyang Cheng's body staggered and he suppressed his urge to vomit blood. He looked at Zhang Xian seriously and replied to him, to become an apothecary, one must be more than capable of knowing and discerning medicinal herbs. One must also learn to formulate medicine, extract and refine the essence of which, condensate and forge it into a pill and many more. Just pill forging itself contains several thousands of methods to do so. It isn't that easy to pass the examination. Indeed. Furthermore, one must possess sharp control over the flame in pill forging. If an error were to occur in any of the sequences, it would end in failure. Only by learning seriously and practicing continuously will one succeed. It is impossible for one to become an apothecary with a moment's effort. Du Man added. So complicated? Zhang Xian felt helpless, so it's impossible for me to achieve it in half a month's time. The freshman tournament would be held in half a month. His purpose here was simple, that was to find a pill that could awaken Yuan Tao and Zhao Ye's unique constitution so that their cultivation would soar by leaps and bounds and they would be able to achieve victory then. Thus, he had to settle this matter in half a month's time. If he wasn't able to, what's the use of him becoming an apothecary? After his conversation with Huang Yu, he had already decided on a goal. That was to become a master teacher. This time, Lu Sun Laosher's challenge was an opportunity as much as a threat. If he was able to emerge victorious, it would prove his capabilities and it was likely that he would catch the eye of a master teacher. Similar to an apothecary, if one wanted to become a master teacher, they must become an assistant master teacher first. This was a process that they must go by. If one wasn't valued by a master teacher, how could one become an assistant master teacher? Half a month, hearing his words, the crowd went speechless once more. Which apothecary wasn't an apprentice apothecary for many years before daring to take the examination? Yet, right after becoming an apprentice, you wish to take the examination for an apothecary half a month some more, you must be joking. Especially for Sun Tao and Zhu Hua, they were just barely suppressing the urge to throw their shoes at him. Brother, is it really all right for you to be putting on an act like this? It is even more difficult to become an apothecary than an apprentice. You should have already seen the others struggling so furiously just to become an apprentice. Becoming an apothecary in half a month? I think you should just keep it to your thoughts, Zhang Xian, don't be too ambitious and complacent. You are barely 20, and becoming an apothecary at 30 is already something unprecedented in Tianxian Kingdom. 15 days is an impossible goal. I advise you to study normally, proceed on step by step and don't think too much into the future. Ouyang Cheng offered his earnest advice to Zhang Xian. This fellow is talented, but he is way too impatient. To want to become an apothecary in half a month you must be daydreaming. Alright, since it is so troublesome, then I will not take the examinations. I will look for another way then. Upon listening to the words of the other party, Zhang Xian shook his head. He didn't have much interest in becoming an apothecary. Possessing the heavens path divine art, breaking through was like eating and drinking to him. Pills were completely unneeded to him. If so, what was the use of becoming an apothecary? If not for Yuan Tao, he wouldn't come here at all. Thinking that Zhang Xian had given up because he had found it bothersome, Ouyang Cheng and Du Man quickly tried to persuade him otherwise. There are many occupations in the world, and apothecary is considered as one of the noblest. You possess such incredible talent and you have also specially taken the trouble to study the medicinal herbs. Wouldn't you have wasted years of your efforts if you were to not become an apothecary at this point? Years of my effort? Zhang Xian blinked. It was just 4 hours, where did the years you speak of come from? I still have other matters to attend to. Since becoming an apothecary is such a complicated process, requiring one to learn how to formulate pills, it is unlikely that I am able to grasp the technique of such within a short moment. I will just give up on it. Without much hesitation, Zhang Xian shook his head. Calm down, there is more than one way for one to become an apothecary. Actually, there is another way other than pill forging. Ouyang Cheng suddenly recalled something and spoke. Given your formidable memory, this method might be more suited for you. It can't be that you are referring to. Astonishment appeared on Du Man's face. Indeed. Ouyang Cheng nodded his head. But you should consider the consequences. If he fails, the penalty will be harsh. He might even lose the opportunity to ever take the examination to become an apothecary. Du Man was filled with anxiety. I know, but this is the only way one can become an apothecary quickly. Otherwise, one would have to walk the conventional path of practicing routinely. Given the countless medicinal herbs and each of their unique properties, it is nigh impossible for one to succeed in a short period of time. Ouyang Cheng said. But, there are no buts. We are only responsible for informing him of the possibility. The choice is up to him. Ouyang Cheng shakes his head. What is this method you speak of? Upon seeing the commotion between the two, Zhang Xian's couldn't help but ask. There are actually two methods for one to become an apothecary. The first method is the usual one, pill forging. As long as one is able to forge a grade 1 pill, he will be able to become a 1-star apothecary. This is the standard and traditional method. Without hesitation, Ouyang Cheng started to explain. The second method is not pill forging but pill debate. Pill debate? Zhang Xian was bewildered. Not just him, even Zhu Huahua, Sun Tao, and the others seemed to have never heard of it, and a perplexed expression appeared on their faces. Indeed. You all should have heard of the noblest occupation of the upper 9 paths, master teacher. Ouyang Cheng said. The crowd nodded their heads. Those who knew of the lower, middle, and upper 9 paths naturally knew of master teachers. This was the highest-ranking occupation of the upper 9 paths, and their social position was superior to that of the apothecaries by numerous folds. The more formidable master teachers can offer pointers beyond that of cultivation, pill forging, smithing, formation creation, and such are all possible for them. Ouyang Cheng explained. However, one has to expend quite a lot of time just to become a master teacher, so how can they have the effort to spend on learning pill forging and smithing to become an apothecary and blacksmith? At the same time, if they do not join their ranks, how can they be qualified to teach them? To deal with such a situation, a unique examination method was created, pill debate. It is clear to see from us apothecaries that one requires a lot of practice, forging pills ceaselessly, to become a true apothecary. However, master teachers do not have the time to waste on doing so. In fact, all he needs is to comprehend and integrate the knowledge of pill forging. That is to say, he doesn't really need to learn how to forge pills. As long as he has complete knowledge of the theory, he is able to successfully become an apothecary. Of course, the examination isn't easy. It requires one to debate with 10 true apothecaries about the various aspects of pill forging, and one could be disqualified with just a single mistake. Furthermore, a huge penalty will be enforced on one if that happens. Ouyang Cheng slowly explained the other method of becoming an apothecary, pill debate, to the others. Chapter 98, I want to debate pills. Oh. There is such a way too. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. Without years of practice, he knew that it was impossible for him to successfully forge a grade 1 pill. However, pill debate was different. With the Library of Heaven's Path, as long as there were sufficient books and knowledge, learning was an easy task for him. This method may seem simple, but even master teachers would rather learn to forge pills than to resort to this method. Noticing the excitement in the other party, Ouyang Cheng interjected and shook his head. Why? Zhang Xian was confused. If one was able to pass the examination based on theories itself to become an apothecary, there should be no need for them to waste their time to learn to forge pills. To tell the truth, it is impossible for one to possess an in-depth understanding into an occupation without trying it hands-on. No matter how much theory one learns, if one doesn't verify them practically, no one can guarantee whether they are right or not. For one who isn't even an apothecary yet to debate with a true apothecary based on knowledge one learnt off the books? Who do you think will win? Ouyang Cheng said. This Zhang Xian nodded his head. What one could learn from the books was shallow, to understand the essence of which, one needs to experience it firsthand. This was a famous maxim expressing the utmost truth. How could one ascertain whether something was right or wrong just by theories itself without trying it out? With just a single error, the entire pill forging would end in failure. One erroneous move would make a great difference. Ever since pill debate was created, more than thousands of master teachers had undergone it and they were all incredible geniuses. Their knowledge of pill forging exceeds that of any apothecary. However, it is a pity that most of them ended up in failure. Of the thousands of master teachers, the ones to succeed might not even exceed the number of fingers on a single hand. Ouyang Cheng sighed. Not exceeding the number of fingers in a single hand? Zhang Xian was taken aback. Out of 1,000 people, not even 5 of them succeeded. This success rate is way too low. Indeed, there is a huge difference between theories and practical. This is precisely the reason why even though pill debate remained a possible way for one to become an apothecary, not many people used it and it was gradually forgotten. Ouyang Cheng shook his head. Pill debate might seem easier than pill forging, but in reality, the difficulty of which was much greater. Without practical experience, how could one succeed in it with just theories? If one didn't have a single mistake in his theory, that meant that his practical should be excellent as well. If so, rather than engaging in a pill debate, he might as well just go for the pill forging method. It would be much easier that way. Others may be unable to, but I can. Ignoring the lamentations of the other party, Zhang Xian's motivation surged and his eyes glowed. Pill debate might be much more difficult for others, but for him, it was nothing short of easy. With the Library of Heaven's Path, he was able to identify errors and flaws directly. Just basing on theories itself, others were unable to tell whether something was true or not. On the other hand, with a single look via the Library of Heaven's Path, everything was clear to him. Conducting a pill debate with this, it was impossible for him to make an error. He could definitely pass the test easily. Since there's such a method, I have decided to try becoming an apothecary through pill debate. Thinking such, Zhang Xian declared without much hesitation. Ah. Initially, he thought that he would be able to persuade the other party to give up after saying so much. He didn't expect his words to cause him to become even more resolute. Ouyang Cheng was speechless. Do you know the consequences of failing a pill debate? Consequences? Yes. Pill debate requires the presence of a minimum of 10 apothecaries to conduct a debate. All these apothecaries are people of high standing, and if there isn't any price to pay for failure and everyone were to go on and try it, wouldn't they tire themselves to death? Ouyang Cheng said. Thus, the guild had set a rule regarding such. If an apprentice who applied for pill debate were to pass the test, nothing would occur. On the other hand, if they were to fail, they will have to pay every single apothecary 100,000 gold coins. On top of that, they will have to suffer 100 god-slaying flogs as punishment. Also, they will be banned from taking the examinations to become an apothecary for a decade. Zhang Xian was speechless. This punishment was truly severe. Given that a pill debate required at least 10 apothecaries, if he had to pay each of them 100,000 gold coins, that meant he would have to fork out 1,000,000 gold coins in total. To an apprentice apothecary, such money was an impossibility among impossibilities. Perhaps, they might not even be able to earn that much money in their entire life. God-slaying flog was a type of punishment. Depending on the cultivation realm of the person, it would exert a different force. 100 god-slaying flogs, even with his current strength, after he was done with the punishment, he would probably be unable to climb out of bed for a month or two. As for the third penalty, a human's lifespan was only around several decades. To be banned from the examinations for a decade, it was equivalent to keeping one away from medicinal herbs and pills for 10 whole years. Basically, this would create an upper limit on a person's future achievements as an apothecary, even if they decided to continue treading on the path. Not only are the consequences severe, it is also a daunting task to pass a pill debate. This is the reason why no one dares to even try it. Based on what I know, there hadn't been a pill debate in Tianxian Kingdom and the dozen or so kingdoms around it for the past few centuries. The dissuasion in Ouyang Cheng's tone was clear. Given your talents, I think you should just go the conventional route and learn pill forging instead. Pill debate isn't a suitable option. I have already decided to go ahead with pill debate. I hope that Master Ouyang can help me make the necessary arrangements. Zhang Xian shook his head in response to his dissuasion. What a joke. If pill debate can make me an apothecary, I have to go along with it. Otherwise, it would take an inestimable amount of time for him to learn pill forging or that sort. Not to mention how he didn't have sufficient time on his hand, he didn't have the effort to waste on it either. Make the necessary arrangements? It can't be that you wish to carry it out now. Master Ouyang staggered. You just became an apprentice apothecary. You don't even know what pill forging is yet, and you want to undergo a pill debate? Are you for real? Are you sure you aren't jesting with me? Yes. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Do you know the contents of a pill debate? Do you know what the apothecaries will ask you about? You have just barely become an apprentice and you have yet to go through the systematic education to undergo a pill debate now. Du Man, who was standing by the side, was also at a loss for words. I can go to the basic tier book collection vault now, right? I can study those that I do not know now. Seeing the anxiety on the other party's faces, Zhang Xian quickly explained. Study? Du Man, Ouyang Cheng, and the others were on a verge of tears. Brother, to think that you will remember to study. You have just become an apprentice apothecary. Despite not having visited the book collection vault before, you wish to undergo a pill debate. Are you very certain that you aren't pulling my leg? There are hundreds of thousands of books in the book collection vault, and it is impossible to finish looking through them without 3 to 5 years of intense effort. Without even paying it a visit, you wish to undergo a pill debate. Are your guts too inflated or is there a problem with your head? I will head to the book collection vault to study later on. Don't worry, it won't take too much time. As for the pill debate, I will be troubling the two of you. Zhang Xian said. Study later on. Everyone felt faint-headed. Do you intend to study last minute? Undergoing a pill debate without studying? To be able to do something so brainless, how did this fellow manage to become an apprentice apothecary? Rest assured, I know the severity of it. I won't do anything I am unconfident of. Just go ahead and make arrangements. I have to start reading now as well. Seeing the crowd rooted to the spot, Zhang Xian continued. Know the severity. Won't do anything you are unconfident of. Your head. Do you know what a cauldron looks like? Do you know whether a pill is round or square? Do you know how do apothecaries extract the essence from medicinal herbs? You don't know a single thing at all, yet you want to take the examination for an apothecary, not to mention, a pill debate. Are you sure that you are confident? All right. Upon his insistence, Ouyang Cheng and Du Man knew that they were unable to convince him otherwise at this point. Trading glances, they shook their heads. I will make arrangements now, but it will take some time to gather so many apothecaries. So, I will set the pill debate to be at tomorrow afternoon. During this period of time, you better carefully contemplate over the matter. Otherwise, once the pill debate starts, you won't be able to back out. Zhang Xian nodded his head. Then, he flung his sleeves with a confident expression and took 2 steps toward the entrance before abruptly turning around. I forgot. Where is the basic tier book collection vault? Ouyang Cheng, Du Man, Sun Tao and Zhu Hua. Chapter 99. A completely stunned Ouyang Cheng and the others felt their insides crumbling apart. To not even know where the basic tier book collection vault was and to choose to undergo the difficult pill debate, they were starting to suspect whether this fellow's head was once crushed by a slammed door. However, since the other party's determination was resolute, there was no point trying to persuade him otherwise at this point. After revealing the location to Zhang Xian and watching as he left, Du Man looked toward Ouyang Cheng and asked, "Isn't he being too reckless?" "He is being reckless, but didn't you see that he is full of confidence as well?" Ouyang Cheng said incredulously. It is truly a wonder where all that confidence came from. Could it be that he doesn't understand the fearsomeness of pill debate? Speaking of such an examination method, Du Man shuddered. Even though I am a one-star apothecary, it is definitely impossible for me to pass the pill debate. Pill debate was something extremely terrifying. It was equivalent to challenging the 10 apothecaries with the knowledge of one. No matter how deep and vast one's knowledge was, how could they compete with that of 10 people? Furthermore, the main problem is that you have never forged a pill before. This is equivalent to the difference between a biologist and a butcher when trying to explain how to slaughter a pig. No matter how excellent your theories are, without trying it out hands-on, it is difficult to succeed. We have already put it out so clearly, it is impossible for him to not to understand. Ouyang Cheng shook his head. This person is truly an enigma. Indeed. In the first round, he achieved a perfect score. In the second, not only was his paper flawless, he even turned around to correct our mistakes. Furthermore, he is still so young. It is truly a wonder where his memorization and reasoning abilities came from. Recalling what that had happened a moment ago filled Du Man with shock. The performance of the fellow previously was simply too outstanding. In terms of the ability to discern medicinal herbs, he was probably an entire level higher than them. An apprentice apothecary that was more knowledgeable than an apothecary himself without witnessing it firsthand, it was something no one would believe. Actually, it is not that difficult to know where his self-confidence came from. Didn't he go to the book collection vault to study? We can send someone over to follow him. It will just be a matter of time before he gives his secret in. Ouyang Cheng said. Since he dared to undergo the pill debate, he definitely possessed vast and deep knowledge of pill forging. As long as they sent someone to follow behind him, it should be possible for them to unravel his secret. You're right. Du Man nodded his head. Gesturing with his hands, he commanded his apprentice, Hua, go and see what he is doing in the basic tier book collection vault. Try to keep your movements silent and inconspicuous so as to not be noticed by him. Yes. Zhu Hua headed to the basic tier book collection vault. Not long later, the apprentice apothecary returned with a peculiar expression on his face. Why? What is he doing? Is he reading some remote pill forging method? Ouyang Cheng stared at him. Apothecaries that participated in the pill debate would definitely come up with extremely difficult and remote questions, making it hard for others to answer. If one wanted to pass the examination, not only must they possess vast knowledge, they must also have a deep understanding of these remote pill forging methods as well. He isn't. Zhu Hua's eyes swam around, as though still in a state of disbelief over what he just witnessed. He is flipping books. Flipping books? Perhaps he is looking for a specific book. Say, what is he flipping through? Ouyang Cheng continued his interrogation. When I was there, he was flipping through basic pill forging books on the shelves. I secretly took a look. They were basic pill forging methods, how to extract the essence of medicinal herbs, preserving medicinal properties, guide to moving cauldrons, and books of that such. I was afraid of getting discovered, so I dared not get near to him. Zhu Hua pondered for a moment before replying. Basic pill forging methods. How to extract the essence of medicinal herbs. Preserving medicinal properties. Guide to Moving Cauldrons? This, Du Man and Ouyang Cheng stared at one another, dumbfounded. Those are the most basic books for apprentice apothecaries, alright, they are knowledge that all apprentice apothecaries need to wield, just like how a human can walk and eat. This fellow is going to undergo pill debate tomorrow, and yet he is flipping through such books only now. Are you sure you aren't mistaken? This is as though after challenging the top swordsman under the heavens to a duel, you suddenly recall that you had to buy a sword and learn how to use it. Are you for real? Are you certain that he is reading these books? Unable to believe it, Ouyang Cheng asked once again. I am not certain. He doesn't seem to be reading but flipping. He flips all the book that he passes by. I have no idea what he is doing. Zhu Hua was on the verge of tears. He truly had no idea what the other party was doing. It was as though he was a lunatic, flipping all the books from the first row of books all the way over. He didn't seem to be reading through them or searching for a specific book, so what in the world could he be doing? Flipping books? All of the book that he passes by. Ouyang Cheng and Du Man blinked their eyes. Why did it sound like nonsense to them? How is he flipping through them? Show us. Du Man said. All right. It happened that there were quite a few books in the room as well. Zhu Hua walked in front, grabbed a dozen of books and flipped through them. The sound of the flipping pages echoed in the room. You're done. Seeing that there were no actions after he was done flipping through those books, Ouyang Cheng and Du Man's eyes enlarged into perfect circles, unable to comprehend the situation. Yes. Zhu Hua nodded his head. Just like that, after he's done, he moves on to the next shelf. Ouyang Cheng and Du Man stared at one another and saw the frenzy in the other's eyes. They thought that this fellow went to the basic tier book collection vault to study, but in the end, he was there just to flip through books. Furthermore, no matter how fast others flipped their books, they would at least try to see what was in it. Yet what in the world can one see flipping through the book at such speed? Putting aside the contents in the book, he probably doesn't even know what the book is about. It can't be that he wishes to see what material the books are made of so that he can burn them down. After a long while, Du Man squeezed out a few words. Other than to burn these books, he truly had no idea what the use of flipping through all those books like that was. Impossible. Even though there aren't any secrets of the Apothecary Guild in the basic tier book collection vault, it isn't something that one can burn down casually. As an apprentice apothecary, he shouldn't be that rash. Ouyang Cheng shook his head. Even though Du Man's words seemed a little absurd, he was truly at a loss for a better explanation. His frown caused his forehead to wrinkle into large lumps. Then, what do you think is going on? What is he trying to do? Du Man couldn't help but ask his colleague. Ouyang Cheng's face reflected nothing but confusion as well. He had never heard of such a freak in his entire life, needless to say, C1. Could it be, is he trying to look for a specific book? Furthermore, the book is made of a special material such that one can only identify it through touch? After a long moment of silence, he came up with a new theory. That's possible. The two of them sat before the desk, frowning at one moment and showing a bitter expression at the other. No matter how hard they tried, they were unable to figure out the secrets of Zhang Xian. In a few short moments, they had come up with all kinds of reasons, generating excuses sufficient to last them for an entire lifetime. Even so, they were still oblivious to what the other party was trying to do. In between, Zhu Hua paid the book collection vault several visits and reported on the other party's situation upon returning. Upon hearing that his movements had never stopped, and he was still flipping through the books, not even sparing books like what are pills, the types of medicinal herbs and their classification, do you need cauldrons to forge a pill? Several emotions flashed across their faces: bewilderment, dilemma, contemplation, confusion. At this moment, they realized that there was still capacity in their minds to generate more peculiar excuses. Chapter 100, Yao Han's doubts. When Zhang Xian was still at the Apothecary Guild, Zhao Ye returned to her living quarters. Finally, I am able to solve this problem of mine. Holding the medicinal herb that Zhang Laoshi gave her in her hands, her excitement was apparent on her clean jade-white face. Discomfort had been torturing her since childhood, and she was already finding herself unable to endure it any further. Upon hearing that there was a solution to her problem, she could no longer sit still. I have to grind this medicinal herb into powder before swallowing it with water. Just as she was about to find something to grind the medicinal herb, she heard footsteps and butler Yao Han walked over sneakily. Xiaojie, I'll be leaving. No one has brought you any trouble, right? Xiaojie young mistress. After offending the grandson of elder Shang Chen and fighting with several teachers in the academy, he decided to leave the academy to avoid unnecessary trouble. Upon seeing that it was about time for Zhao Ye's classes to end, he came back to find her. Brought me trouble? Who would bring me trouble? Zhao Ye stared at Yao Han. I say, Uncle Yao, you should stop being so sensitive. Zhang Laoshi truly treats me well, and he is actually a capable teacher at that. Please stop troubling him. She knew her father's butler didn't trust Zhang Laoshi, thus she tried to persuade him otherwise. Treat you well? Xiaojie, you have been living in the city since young, so you have never seen how vile a human's heart can be, Yao Han harumphed. Before he could finish his words, his eyes happened upon the medicinal herb in Zhao Ye's hands. His entire body froze before he started trembling uncontrollably. Xiaojie, that medicinal herb in your hands, where did you get it from? This? Lowering her head to ascertain what Yao Han was looking at, Zhao Ye lifted the medicinal herb up and said, Zhang Laoshi gave me this. I have been feeling unwell recently, so he passed me this to have me grind it and consume it. Zhang Laoshi gave you this? How is this possible? How can a poor teacher like him? Yao Han was unable to believe the situation unfolding before him. What's wrong, Uncle Yao? Is there something wrong with this medicinal herb? Zhao Ye knew the other party was a reliable character and there had to be a reason for that expression of his. No, it's not that there's something wrong with the herb but that it is too valuable. If I'm not wrong, this is frigid sun mother grass. Yao Han exclaimed. Frigid sun mother grass. Zhao Ye was lost. It's the mother grass of frigid sun grass. Its effects are 10 times greater than that of frigid sun grasses. Frigid sun grasses aren't valuable, but this thing is extremely expensive. Back then when I was traveling around the kingdom alongside the city lord, I once had seen one and a single stalk was priced above 100,000 gold coins. Upon hearing how valuable the herb was, Zhao Ye was taken aback. Uncle Yao, are you not mistaken? I am not mistaken. This is definitely frigid sun mother grass. It is the most valuable medicinal herb that I have ever seen, so I have a deep impression of it. How can I possibly be wrong about it? Yao Han took another glance at it to confirm his conjecture. Frigid sun mother grass. 100,000 gold coins. Zhao Ye's slim body trembled. You said that Zhang Laoshi gave it to you? Yao Han dared not to believe it at all. As he spoke, he even changed his method of addressing the other party from Zhang Xian to Zhang Laoshi. Isn't he the worst teacher in the academy? Isn't his wages the lowest among the teachers? To gift such a valuable medicinal herb so simply, indeed. Zhao Ye nodded her head. Back then when Zhang Laoshi passed her the herb, he threw it casually to her as though it wasn't anything valuable at all. In fact, it wasn't even packaged, so all along, she thought of it as such, 100,000 gold coins. That is sufficient to buy a residence in the capital. Furthermore, a huge one. When others presented a gift, they would make a big fuss over it so as to make the whole world know how valuable their gift was. Yet, this Zhang Laoshi created a cultivation technique just for her and gifted her such an expensive gift without demanding credit for it. He was completely nonchalant about it, and if it wasn't for Uncle Yao recognizing the herb, she would have just treated the herb as something invaluable and consumed it just like that. Zhao Ye felt moved and her eyes reddened slightly. I can't accept this. It's too valuable. Zhao Ye's slim body straightened and resolution appeared in her eyes. She hoped to solve the problem plaguing her, but as a student, she couldn't bear to receive continuously from her teacher without repaying him. Usually, it was the students who gave their teachers gifts to please them. Yet, Zhang Laoshi had given so much to them. It was one thing if she didn't know about it, but now that she realized it, she wouldn't be a human if she accepted his gifts nonchalantly. "Uncle Yao, how much money do you have on you?" Zhao Ye turned around and asked. "Only 20,000. Yao Han flipped through his pockets and retrieved several notes. He might be the butler of Baiyu City, but his mission this time was only to escort Xiao Jie to the academy, so he didn't bring much money. "Give it to me." Grabbing it over, Zhao Ye didn't hesitate and dashed out. Feeling fretful, Yao Han hurriedly followed behind her. Soon, they arrived at the classroom, but no one was in sight. There was also no one at Zhang Xian's dormitory. Upon seeing Xiao Jie so panicked, Yao Han utilized some of his connections and swiftly, he was informed that Zhang Laoshi was at the Apothecary Guild. Before leaving, Zhang Xian didn't try to conceal his destination. As the butler of the city lord residence, it was normal for him to possess such connections to gather information. Apothecary Guild? Could it be that Zhang Laoshi bought this medicinal herb there? Zhao Ye clenched her fist. After a moment of hesitation, she gritted her jade teeth and said, "Uncle Yao, let's go and find Zhang Laoshi." If she didn't pass this money to the other party, she would feel too embarrassed to accept this herb. If someone treated her so selflessly, she would do the same to him. How could she, Zhao Ye, consume such an expensive medicinal herb nonchalantly now that she knew of its value? Soon, she arrived at the Apothecary Guild. Now that they were here, it was easy to find news on him. It didn't take long for the duo to find Wen Shui, who still had an awful look on her face. "You mean Zhang Laoshi is currently taking the apprentice apothecary examinations?" "Zhang Laoshi? You're saying that playboy Zhang Xian is a teacher?" Wen Shui was bewildered. After a moment, she recovered and nodded her head. He is currently taking the apprentice apothecary examination." "Apprentice apothecary?" Zhao Ye and Yao Han exchanged gazes. Disbelief was especially apparent on Yao Han's face. An apprentice apothecary has to memorize the properties of medicinal herbs, and there is at least 100,000 medicinal herb they have to remember for the examination. Without several years of studying, it is impossible for one to pass the examination. Zhao Ye might not know too much about apothecaries, but as the butler of Baiyu City Lord Residence, Yao Han was well aware of it. Naturally, he understood the difficulty in becoming an apprentice apothecary. A young and incapable teacher went to take the apprentice apothecary examination. He probably failed, right? "I know that this examination is difficult," Yao Han couldn't help but ask her. "Fail?" "Initially, I shared your thoughts." Upon recalling the earlier occurrence, Wen Shui still felt incredulous. She bit her lips and harumphed. "There are 3 rounds to the apprentice apothecary examinations. The first round is written paper, and not only did he pass, he even achieved a perfect score. Currently, he is undergoing the second round." "Perfect score?" Yao Han's body swayed. The first examination assessed a candidate's understanding of the traits and properties of medicinal herbs. Many people found themselves halted by this barrier. Yet, this teacher whom he had always thought of as a trash successfully passed the examination, achieving a perfect score. Even to casually gift someone a medicinal herb worth 100,000 gold coins, to induce Xiao Jie to become his student so willingly, and to achieve a perfect score in the first round of the apprentice apothecary examination. Is he really the trash of the legends? For the first time, Yao Han doubted the rumors circulating around outside. Chapter 101, Zhao Ye is moved. As Xiao Jie was adamant to acknowledge Zhang Xian as her teacher, Yao Han had been looking into Zhang Xian's background these few days. This Zhang Laoshi was once known as a genius, reaching Fighter 3 Danjinchi realm by 16 years old. However, his legacy stopped there. He had been stuck at that cultivation realm ever since, and as time passed, the genius became trash. At 18 years old, he took the teacher examination and passed in one go, thus becoming Hengtian Academy's youngest teacher. Back then, his name rang brightly, incurring the envy of numerous teachers. Initially, they thought that this young teacher would be able to produce good results and soar to great heights. Yet, the reality was cruel. After news of the cultivation of his student going berserk spread out, all of the students he admitted withdrew from his lessons and he was left alone. Eventually, he even scored a 0 for his teacher qualification examination, causing his reputation to sour further. Thus, Hengtian Academy's youngest teacher became a joke and the greatest trash. These rumors were everywhere. So he thought that it was just a moment of folly on Xiaojie's part, but as long as he properly enlightened her, she would realize her mistake and see through the true nature of this trash of a teacher. At this moment, upon hearing that he scored perfectly for the first round of the apothecary examinations, his deep-rooted thoughts started to waver. Apothecaries had to have an in-depth knowledge of medicinal herbs and also a deep understanding of the human body. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for them to concoct pills suited for cultivators. So, how could someone who passed the first round of the apprentice apothecary examination possibly cause a student's cultivation to go berserk? No matter how good he is in theories, it is useless if he is unable to utilize them practically. The second round of the examination is medicinal herb discernment time trial. Of the 10 medicinal herbs, if he were to get a single one of them wrong, he will fail the examination. When Shui harumphed furiously. She still felt resentment toward Zhang Xian. Initially, she thought that he was a playboy intentionally acting to attract her attention. In the end, he turned out to be someone capable, causing her face to burn in embarrassment and become unable to face the other party. At this point, they saw two people walking over. They were the 2 out of the 3 who passed the first round of examinations, Sun Tao and Qian Wen Man. How is it, did you two pass the examination? Wen Shui hurried forward and asked them. As frequent candidates for the apprentice apothecary examinations, they were well acquainted with one another. No. The both of them shook their heads in disappointment. They felt discontent, but this loss was something they could concede. After all, they had to concede even if they didn't want to. The other person scored full marks in the first round, and in the second, he was even able to point out the mistakes of true apothecaries. His abilities were way beyond their imaginations. Then what about Zhang Xian? Upon hearing that they didn't pass the second round, Wen Shui couldn't help but ask once more. He passed. He is an apprentice apothecary now. Sun Tao said. Apprentice apothecary? Wen Shui's small stature staggered. Previously, when she was conversing with the other party, it had been clear to her that that fellow had zero understanding of medicinal herbs and such. In fact, he wasn't even clear on what an apothecary was initially. She thought that it was a joke for him to register for the examinations, so she was filled with disdain toward him. Yet not only did he pass the round of examinations, he even went on to bash through the remaining 2 to successfully become an apprentice apothecary. This slap caused a fiery and stinging sensation on her face. She had toiled for so many years, only to be remained blocked out in the very first round. Yet the other party became an apprentice apothecary so easily. She even mocked the other party for his thick skin. Where did her confidence originate from? That when will Zhang Laoshi come out? Zhao Ye looked around but didn't see Zhang Xian anywhere. Thus, she asked the 2. She wasn't as surprised as Wen Shui was. That's because the image of Zhang Laoshi in her heart was omnipotent, and becoming a mere apprentice apothecary should mean nothing at all to him. He went to the book collection vault. He intends to return tomorrow afternoon to undergo pill debate to become a certified apothecary. Sun Tao still found the situation unbelievable even as he said these words himself. How much guts did it take for him to choose to undergo pill debate right after becoming an apprentice apothecary? Undergo pill debate to become a certified apothecary? Wen Shui staggered and her eyes were about to pop out from their sockets. Giddiness filled her head. Tomorrow afternoon? Are you for real? Why does it sound like a joke to me? Also, what in the world is a pill debate? Pill debate is another method for one to become an apothecary. One has to debate with 10 official apothecaries and emerge victorious over them. Seeing the perplexed looks of the crowd, Sun Tao explained. This examination is even more difficult than pill forging, and the penalties upon failure are much greater. At this point, he shook his head subconsciously. I have once read of pill debate in the books. The difficulty of it is much greater than the pill forging examination. One needs to triumph over 10 official apothecaries in terms of knowledge on practical aspects of pill forging. It is an exceptionally difficult test. Uncle Li suppressed the shock he was experiencing and nodded his head to affirm what Sun Tao said. At the same time, he couldn't help but be baffled. He is able to become an apprentice apothecary at such a young age, so he shouldn't lack time. Why is he so anxious such that he had to choose to undergo pill debate? He could just tread upon the normal route to learn pill forging. After all, the consequences of failing a pill debate is difficult to bear. His accomplishment of becoming an apprentice apothecary under 20 years old was an incredible feat even when taking the previous 1,000 years of history of Tianxian Kingdom's apothecary guild into account. He wouldn't lose out much to slow down and learn pill forging properly. There was no need for him to put himself at risk by undergoing pill debate. One must know that the difficulty of pill debate was several times that of pill forging, and successes were rare. I'm not sure too. He seems to be looking for books regarding unique constitutions. However, these books are only available to certified apothecaries. Sun Tao mused for a moment and recalled the conversation between Zhang Xian and Ouyang Cheng. Oh, he also mentioned something about half a month. It seems that there is something urgent that requires him to become an apothecary within half a month to find those books. Half a month? Unique constitution. While Wen Shui and the others simply found the situation baffling, Zhao paled and trembled uncontrollably. She had a unique constitution, pure in body. This was something that Zhang Laoshi told her. Half a month, wasn't that the day of the freshman tournament? To be rushing to accomplish it within half a month, could it be that Zhang Laoshi intends to awaken her unique constitution to raise her strength? After all, a unique constitution held no might if it wasn't awakened. It must be it. Clenching her fists tightly, Zhao suppressed the emotions in her heart. She looked at Uncle Li and asked, Senior, you said that the penalties upon failure are great. May I ask what the penalties are? This I'm not too sure either. Uncle Li shook his head. He had only read of pill debate in the books, so he wasn't really aware of the penalties. Oh, I know. Master Ouyang had spoken of it previously. Sun Tao contemplated for a moment and said, there is a total of 3 penalties. Firstly, one has to pay each apothecary with 100,000 gold coins, so that's a total of 1,000,000 gold coins for the 10 of them. Secondly, he has to suffer 100 god-slaying flogs. Thirdly, he is banned from the apothecary examination for 10 years. 1,000,000 gold coins. 100 god-slaying flogs. Banned from the apothecary examination for 10 years. Zhao Ya's body trembled even more intensely. This punishment was way too severe. In order to help her awaken her constitution, Zhang Laoshi was willing to go through so much peril. Teacher, thank you. Even if I, Zhao Ya, were to be smashed to smithereens, it would be difficult for me to repay this gratitude. Unable to hold back her billowing emotions any longer, tears streamed down from Zhao Ya's clean jade-like face. Chapter 102, To the Top of the World, Who? It's finally done. Zhang Xian had been flipping through the books since afternoon, and it was already around 10 at night. Finally done with his work, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. There were all kinds of books on in the basic tier book collection vault, and they were all regarding pill forging. Even though his cultivation realm had risen by leaps and bounds recently, flipping through that huge collection of books still caused him fatigue. After flipping through all of the books, he confirmed that there were no books regarding unique constitutions in this book collection vault. Naturally, he was unable to find an answer to his question. That was to say, he had to become an apothecary to look through the advanced tier book collection vault to achieve his goals. This knowledge should be enough for the apothecary examination. Even though the Apothecary Guild in Tianxian Kingdom was only a small branch, it had the powerful headquarters backing it. As such, even if the country were to fall, the guild would not. After a duration of several centuries, perhaps even a millennium, even a basic tier book collection vault would contain a vast amount of knowledge in it. Even a true apothecary couldn't possibly finish all of the books and assimilate all knowledge in them for his own. However, Zhang Xian was able to do so. With this much knowledge, if he were to claim to be the second most knowledgeable person in pill forging in Tianxian Kingdom, no one would dare to claim themselves to be the first. Of course, this was all just theory. If he were to really try it, putting aside pill forging, he might even have difficulty starting the fire. I should go and grab a bite. Fondling his protesting stomach, Zhang Xian stretched his back and walked out of the book collection vault with widened strides. Right after eating breakfast, he went to lessons, underwent the Enlightenment Will trial and took the apprentice apothecary examination. After busying himself for an entire day, his stomach had already started growling furiously long ago. If not for the rise in his cultivation realm and enhanced physical body, he might have found himself unable to persist on for that long. The basic tier book collection vault was inside the examination hall for apprentice apothecaries. Walking out, he saw Ouyang, Cheng and Du Man sitting inside. They were holding brushes in their hands, seemingly scribbling something on a piece of paper, and bewilderment, dilemma, contemplation, and confusion could be seen on their faces. What are you all doing? Seeing the two apothecaries in such a state, Zhang Xian walked over curiously. The both of them were trying to figure out what Zhang Xian was doing. Upon seeing him walk over, the both of them were taken aback. They hurriedly used their hands to cover the contents of the paper on the table. Zhang Xian lowered his head to take a look. A few words come into his sight. Speculation on his motive for flipping through books in the book collection vault. Number 1, act cool, 30 votes. Number 2, boredom, 1 vote. Number 3, investigating the material of the books, 1 vote. After reading the first few lines, black lines streaked across Zhang Xian's face. Is this about me? He was the only one flipping through books in the book collection vault previously. Cough cough, we were just curious of your actions of flipping through the books in the book collection vault. Thus, we couldn't help but discuss it. Exposed, Ouyang Cheng suppressed his embarrassment and revealed the truth. Ouyang Cheng has a reputation for being a strict and stern apothecary. To think that he would be hiding in the room with another apothecary to discuss the motive behind an apprentice apothecary's action of flipping through books, even getting others to vote on it, no one would believe it even if word was to spread out. I wanted to look for a book, I wasn't able to find it, so I continued flipping through all of the books in the vault. Zhang Xian casually answered. He mustn't reveal the truth about the Library of Heaven's Path, but his action of flipping through the books was indeed a little bizarre, so it couldn't be helped that others would hold suspicion toward his actions. Looks like he had to be more careful in the future. Even so, he was just flipping through books. Others might hold doubt toward the intention behind his actions, but at most, they would just be unable to make heads or tails out of his actions. It was impossible for them to suspect the possibility of an existence of a massive library in his head. Such a simple answer. Upon hearing the answer, Ouyang Cheng and Du Man looked constipated. They had been discussing the matter for an entire afternoon, even skipping their meals to do so. They thought that there was some special significance behind his actions. Never would they dream that the answer was so simple. What else would it be if not for that? Zhang Xian asked. It would do as long as it didn't involve the revelation of the existence of the Library of Heaven's Path. He could tell a lie without feeling embarrassed over it anyway. All right then. Ouyang Cheng shook his head helplessly. After investigating and analyzing the issue for an entire afternoon, he didn't expect the other party's answer to be so simple. Thus, to alleviate the awkwardness of the situation, he could only change the topic. I have already informed the 10 apothecaries about the pill debate. They will be here tomorrow, so make preparations for it. It will be conducted here tomorrow afternoon. Great. Zhang Xian nodded his head. After asking a few more questions about how the pill debate would be conducted, he turned around and took his leave. After walking out of the room, he heard Du Man's voice ringing behind him. You lost, pay up. I lost, but you didn't win either. You wagered most of your money on him acting cool, Ouyang Cheng said with a displeased tone. Zhang Xian staggered. You all are respectable apothecaries, all right. To gamble over me furthermore, acting cool. Your head that I am acting cool. With a stifled sensation at his chest, Zhang Xian walked to the entrance of the Apothecary Guild and caught sight of Zhao and the others. Why are you here? Bewilderment flashed across his eyes. This is the Apothecary Guild, not the Academy. Why would Zhao be here? Zhang Laoshe, thank you. Upon seeing him, Zhao could no longer suppress the emotions in her and kneels to the floor. Gratitude reflected in her eyes. Stand up, stand up. What are you thanking me for? Zhang Xian frowned. What happened to this lass? Kneeling down upon seeing me. Could it be that her illness is cured? At this point, he asked, have you eaten the frigid sun mother grass yet? How are its effects? Upon hearing frigid sun mother grass, Yao Han, who considered the possibility of whether Zhang Xian was ignorant of the value of the herb before gifting it to Zhao, trembled. It looks like he knows the herb. If so, he should know the value of it as well. To give such a valuable herb to his students so casually, and to put himself in peril by taking the apothecary examination for the sake of awakening his students' unique constitution, regardless of how Zhang Xian's lessons were, just this responsibility of his was sufficient to leave him in awe. Zhang Laoshe, I apologize for my previous insolent attitude and doubting your kindness. Please forgive me. Yao Han stepped forward and bowed in apology. His previous actions were truly laughable. How can such a responsible teacher be inadequate in his teachings? Seems like the rumors outside are untrue after all. This, upon seeing the both of them behaving like that, Zhang Xian blinked his eyes. Can anyone tell me what is going on? I had only taken an apprentice apothecary examination, why are they suddenly behaving so bizarrely? Soon, he made sense out of the situation. Actually, his reason for coming here wasn't just to awaken Zhao unique constitution, it was more for Yuan Tao instead. He didn't expect such a simple action to induce such feelings of gratitude in her. However, he came to a realization after contemplating over the situation slightly. In the perspective of others, pill debate was something that was likely to end in failure. It was a huge risk to take, and yet he chose to proceed ahead even so. In their eyes, he had become a teacher who could give up his all and bash through all obstacles just for his students. Just this sentiment itself was priceless. Upon understanding this all, Zhang Xian was at a loss for words. His actions had moved Zhao. But similarly, the other party's actions had also moved him. In the past, he had only treated these students as anchors to prevent him from getting expelled. However, at this moment, he realized the simple fact that all humans have emotions. They would treat you like how you treat them. The children's desire for knowledge and the gratitude they felt toward him made him understand the responsibilities of a teacher and the heavy burden they shouldered. Don't worry. As my students, I will bring you all to greater heights, all the way to the top of the world. Clenching his fists tightly together, Zhang Xian made a solemn vow. At this moment, he had finally made his metamorphosis from a transcender to a teacher. Boom! The moment such a thought appeared, at the apex of the Library of Heaven's path, an intense peal sounded and a golden book formed. However, Zhang Xian didn't notice it,